Commissioner Nanke?
Here.
Commissioner Dickey?
Here.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Here.
Guest Commissioner Jim Bauer?
Here.
Commissioner Lewis?
Here.
Commissioner Karavayev? It's absent. Chair McQuaid?
Here. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's no additions and deletions to the agenda. Public comment? We have no public comment, so moving right along. Commissioner Lewis, do you have a motion for me on the consent calendar?
Yes, I would move passage of the minutes from the February 8th meeting of the Salem Housing Authority.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Lewis, seconded by Commissioner Nanke, to approve the minutes from the February 8th, 2016 commission meeting. Any discussion? All those
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner
The
Nanke?
information reports would be part of the consent calendar. Were you looking to make it two motions, or?
Yeah, I actually wanted to
Okay.
discuss that.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar?
No,
Say
only
aye.
the minutes.
Or the minutes, I'm sorry. For the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So,
Information
Commissioner
report.
Lewis?
And I just, Andy, I wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to have any update, and then after that, I did have one specific question.
go ahead, Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out the business profile on page 3 of 5. It highlights a program that HUD provides moving to work. It's an opportunity for housing authorities to gain some flexibility relative to regulatory oversight. Even in some cases, you can get waivers for statutory provisions, law provisions, I should say. And so this is a program that SHA looked at in 2012. And at that time, there was only 3 slots available for new housing authorities. And we looked at the numbers and thought out of 3,500 public housing authorities across the country that were eligible, that 3 slots was a pretty slim margin. This time, however, you'll see in the report that there's an additional 100 housing authorities that would be able to move into the Moving to Work program. And there's also a 7-year implementation period. So we have no idea how quickly anything will move, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I do believe that it's worth looking at when the time comes. For instance, there are 35 housing authorities across the country that are moving to work. A handful in the area. Portland Housing Authority is a moving to work housing authority. They've done things like, with flexibility, like applying their Section 8 vouchers to a project-based without having to compete in the marketplace. We have to compete. If we were going to do project-based of vouchers now, we'd have to do a solicitation out to the general public for the general public to have a chance to respond. Vancouver, Washington is a moving to work agency. For instance, what they're doing, one of their programs is they're giving rental discounts to households that are working with children, if they're getting training, if they're going to college. So there's a whole host of flexible programs you can put together to, at a minimum, help people to stay in housing, but beyond that, multiple kinds of programs that you could structure to help the clients to actually get on a path of self-sufficiency. So that's more than I wanted to say, but I thought it was important. Thank you.
Commissioner Lewis?
And I have one other question, and this just comes from I can't ever remember where I read it, but it was to do with discussions that I think was with the state of Oregon and the Salem Housing Authority about the possibility of looking at some of the building or buildings on the former hospital site.
Correct.
For affordable housing. I don't know if it's too early to talk about that, but it piqued my interest.
That's a great question. We have had conversations with the representatives from DAS. The city staff that's been involved with the hospital. I've had a lot of conversations with them. I've been in a couple meetings with them. We think there could be some potential, but I think we're probably going to have a discussion at the end of this month.
But look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Bauer?
Just a quick question about the moving to work.
Yes, sir.
Does that apply to all, so this would be a program that applies to all the housing that you offer through the system, or is it designed to spur new housing?
Well, it could do both.
Okay.
I should have been more specific. We have a lot of affordable housing that is not HUD funded, right?
Right. That's
So public housing, which is HUD funded, and the voucher program, which is HUD funded, those two programs are the ones that HUD would give us the leeway, if you will, to create, and to create different programs. Really, the project basing allows us to create more affordable housing in more properties, especially in a market like this, which would have quite a bit of merit, I think.
So the idea is that it wouldn't necessarily apply to your own regular Section 8. You'd go out and find more housing.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you, Andy. Wait. Oh, Commissioner Nguyen.
I had a question about the North Campus
Yes, ma'am.
housing. Some of those buildings, at least 2 or 3, are going to be torn down in the near future, foreseeable future. Are you talking about perhaps saving some of the other buildings for that purpose, or saving the ones that might be torn down?
Well, I don't think we yet have a strategy, to be candid with you, but there are buildings that will be saved and buildings that will be
Sure. No,
demolished.
we've always thought all along,
Right.
as a neighbor, I'm right across the street from there.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of us have often thought that there would be a real place for housing of some sort.
Right.
By just rehabbing a couple of very large buildings like the Kenau or something.
Right. We're in a lot of discussions with the
Great.
DAS folks, but we hope to be involved out there for sure for affordable and mixed income housing. Yes.
That's good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. We've got no special orders of business, no unfinished business, no new business. Therefore, the meeting of the commission is adjourned.
Point of order, did we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Well, we had a motion to approve the minutes, and the PMR is technically part of the consent calendar, but it doesn't require your approval.
Because it's an information item.
You got that?
Process-wise over the year.
Okay. Call to order the meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. Recorder, please call the roll.
Board Member Bennett?
Here.
Guest Board Member Marin?
Here.
Board Member Nanki?
Here.
Board Member McCoy?
Here.
Board Member Dickey? Board Member Benjamin? Here. Guest Board Member Bauer?
Here?
Board Member Lewis?
Here.
Chair Peterson's absent.
Thank you. So, Member Nanki, do we have motion for approval and additions and deletions to the agenda?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair. I would move approval of the addition of written testimony to 4.3A.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Almost died for lack of.
Moved by Councilor Nanke, seconded by Councilor Lewis, approval of the additions and deletions to the agenda with the pull of 4.2A. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion passes. We have no reports of boards, commissions, and committees. Do you have any public comment? We have no public comment. So moving to the consent calendar. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move the consent calendar with the following pulls: 4.2A by Member Nanke and 4.3A by Member Bennett.
Okay, it's moved by Councilor Nanke and seconded by Councilor Dickey to approve the consent calendar with pulls of 4.2A by Councilor Nanke and 4.3A by Councilor Bennett. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Mr. Chair, if I can just mention the other two items that we haven't pulled. There's also, that will pass with this motion, an amendment to a development agreement on Portland Road to extend a deadline, and then appointments to the North Gateway Redevelopment Advisory Board as well.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Moving right along. Now we get to special orders. Right. Now we're at special orders of business. Councilman Nanke, do you have a motion for me on 4.2A?
Yes, I would move staff recommendation.
Have a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilor Nanke, seconded by Councilor Dickey to move the staff recommendation to item 4.2A. Councilor Nanke?
Yeah, this is in regards to installing silt fencing at Phase 1A on the Mill Creek Corporate Center to discourage nesting of streaked horned larks. And I've spoken with staff a bit today as well about that, and I know one of our guest counselors gave us a wonderful photo of said bird, and I think wanted to make a comment as well.
I did.
Yes, Councilor Wynn.
Thank you. The street-horned lark is pretty rare. It's endangered, it's federally protected, and they're really very much in need of a little boost from the human beings around. They normally nest in flat, rocky, or stony areas, old washes, old riverbeds, that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of those left. But when they got a hold of the fact that a lot of their territory was being in upheaval by humankind, making of flat surfaces with rocks became pretty easy for them to find. Unfortunately, that means they're in a construction zone. They're going to start putting the silt fencing up immediately. The minute you say anything, they're going to do it tomorrow because they have it on the site. There are several people that would just like to wait another week to get some expert testimony prepared to say maybe we should wait a little longer through the breeding season until that particular parcel is allowed back into commerce, just to give them a little boost. I'd hate to lose 6 to 8 chicks. I know that doesn't sound like very many, but to an endangered species, it's a lot. So that's just my thought. Just wait a little.
We have staff that would like to respond, sort of give a background on why this proposal's up and what it's meant to do.
Sure. Yes, Kristen Rutherford, the city's urban development director. So the Urban Development Department has been working very closely with environmental consultants and biologists with Oregon State University to develop a mitigation plan for the street horned lark in this site. Their nesting season typically begins in the middle of April. It the nesting season is not occurring now. So this mitigation plan is to put the silt fencing in place before the nesting season begins so that they would go to other locations to do their nesting, not nest here or be disrupted in this location. We also have development interest in this specific location where the company that's going through their due diligence right now is very interested in breaking ground this summer. And if we were to not install the silt fencing to deter nesting in this location, and the birds were to start nesting, then it could postpone development on this site and the business investment here until the next construction season. And a year from now, we would be back in the same situation.
Or potentially without a business.
Councilor Bennett?
Is there a history of this bird nesting at this site? Is that what's going on here, that you have had them there in the past?
When the biological assessment was conducted, it was identified as a nesting site.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Did they survey the area for other sites, say within a mile of where these birds are currently nesting?
Did the biologists
You know, I mean,
survey it?
Is there any way to find out whether they've identified other areas where the birds can go? If this is their habitat, not just the flyby, let's lay an egg and move on, but their couple of year habitat. Maybe we could encourage them to something if we knew where it was.
So my understanding from a tour I had of this area a few months ago is that there is other land in this general vicinity that is suitable as
okay.
nesting habitat.
So there is suitable
Yes.
habitat.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Hearing none, we're ready to vote? She called. Just go on. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, which is to adopt the staff recommendation, indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Councilor Bennett, do you have a motion for us?
I do, Mr. Chair. I move that item 4.3A be postponed until the next Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, my issue here is, I think, contained in one of the additions to the agenda that came from Michael Livingston, who is one of the folks at the Can-Do neighborhood, expressing concern that perhaps with some of these sites there may be existing businesses or property owners that are kind of unaware that they're being considered for this, and I thought this would give the staff a chance to make contact with them and let them know. The one that is specifically mentioned is Scott's Cycle. Was surprised to discover it was in the line of progress here, and probably would like to have known that in advance, and I think it'd be a just good way to handle this, to give the urban renewal staff time to at least alert people who are in business or on property as they're available that this is being talked about, in case they want to come down and talk to us as an agency about being included as an opportunity site, just so we can hear what's going on out there and nobody's caught by surprise.
Councilor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we've had this problem in the past as well. We used to have dots in the urban renewal area on top of properties that drove everybody crazy and they could never sell their property. Just suggestion maybe for the city manager that we develop some kind of a policy because right now they can't talk to the property owners until council does something, but it's always in the agenda, and then somebody who's friends with that person sees it and says, hey, they're going to try to take your property. Some kind of a policy where we can actually at least let those business owners know of an action that may be coming toward us before we actually meet that night, so that they can at least have intelligent input and come down and talk to us, because some of them may not even know that they're on that list, and they're at home and they'll hear something after we've met on it, and that's even worse, I think, from a public relations perspective.
Any other questions? Guest Counselor Bauer.
Thanks, sir. One other thing that comes to my eye when I look at this is that there are activities in place that have been developed through the downtown urban renewal district for some of these areas, the housing study area, some parts of the bike ped plan. I mean, there are lots of moving parts that have been developed over the years from studies that have been commissioned. Yeah, sorry, rookie. So there's a lot of activity around some of these sites that have some that the community imagines those things are going to be integrated into the planning. And so if there is a way of making sure that that gets looked at as the property get looked at, an example would be the O'Brien site is also in an area that the Downtown Advisory Board identified as a housing strategy site. So there's a lot of moving parts that have been accumulated over the years for some of these areas.
Councilor Dickey?
Thanks. Just, and I forgot to mention this to you when we chatted on the phone last night. So my name is on there as one of the properties being in Ward 5. I don't see that on this map here. It goes A through D, and maybe I'm just missing something. It says Highland and Northgate. Maybe, I don't know if that's an error or if I don't see Highland or Northgate on this map.
I do think that it is in error.
Okay. All right. So there aren't any properties in Highland or Northgate that are being considered. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? So the motion before us, you want to state it again, Councilor Bennett?
Yes, thank you. I move that the item 4.3A be postponed until the next Urban Renewal Agency session.
Second.
It was already seconded, wasn't it? Yeah, it was already seconded. So the motion before us is to postpone item 4.3A until the next urban renewal meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So we are now to... That's it, isn't it?
There were a couple information items.
Okay. So, next item is information reports. We've got a report on some of the activities Urban Renewal is doing in converting of brownfields to productive uses, progress on the State Street Corridor Plan, progress on the 25th Street and Madrona Avenue Southeast road improvements in the information report, and also an update on the Pringle Creek area development plan, where it's going through the various areas of what we're calling, which include the new apartment buildings, the new area we bought for the park, what's going on in with the developments, new buildings that are going to be in the north block of that property, and to date, any activity on the two other, the creek and the slough properties in that development. So it's progressing, as you know, and moving around fairly well. So that's what's in the information report. Councilor Nang?
In regards to 5A on the 25th Street and Madrona Street closure, we are actually looking at a June 1st shutdown of the street.
I believe that's
October 31st.
I believe that's true. We successfully bid the project last week, so we'll be entering into negotiations with the contractor, and as soon as they're ready to roll, we'll be moving to that. So that sounds about right at this point.
Because we've already started seeing some construction work, and there was a notification out that we may see some delays in traffic. We just need to let people know as soon as possible and as often as we can that Madrona will be shut down for several months, and Kubler will be under construction at the same time. So
right,
just so that they're ready, and like always, all of a sudden don't try to go this way and then try to go this way and not be able to get there in like the population typically does get angry at us.
Yeah.
So we need to spread those messages far and wide from here on out then.
Yeah, and I apologize. Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. The work that's been going on out there is utility relocation. So there's some impact to traffic. When the time comes to close the street, there will be reader boards and a lot of notification, because there is going to be a lot of activity this summer in that part of town, and it's going to be a little painful, but there's going to be a lot of gain. So looking forward to it.
Just pre-notice is not a bad thing.
Yes,
So, and we can stick out a board letting people know
we will.
June 1st, this will be down.
Well, I think the notice is there if you drove through there. I went through the other day, and one lane was already closed, so it's coming. Any other comments? Okay, we move on through the agenda. Public hearings, we have none. New business, we have none. So this meeting is Salem Urban Renewal Agency is closed. Okay, call to order the meeting, the Salem City Council. Recorder, call the roll, please.
Counselor Bennett?
Here.
Guest Counselor Wren? Counselor Nanki?
Here.
Counselor McCoy?
Here.
Counselor Dickey? Counselor Benjamin?
Here.
Guest Counselor Bauer?
Here.
Counselor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Peterson's absent.
Okay, Councilor Nanki, do we have a motion for approval of additions and deletions to the agenda, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would move approval of additions, which include written testimony for both the public hearing for B on an eminent domain proceeding and 7B on imposing a 3% tax on sale of marijuana items.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Nanki and seconded by Councilor Lewis to approve the additions and deletions to the agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Now it's time for council and city manager comment. Councilor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just mention a couple things that came up over the weekend. I was invited and spoke at the 40th anniversary of Troop 150 over in West Salem. It was a really great event. It seemed to involve a large percentage of people from who live in West Salem who've been involved in scouting there. And a particular note I thought along the way was it was held at the fairly new John Gray Hall over at the 4-H Center over in West Salem, which is just a spectacular facility if you're looking for a place for almost any kind of meeting, a wedding. Those of you who are quite young, your 50th birthday, anything like that, this is a great place to go. The other was I had an opportunity to participate in the Young Artists Showcase over at Bush Barn, where you had a couple hundred kids from various schools and programs here in the community who presented their art, and it's still up, I believe. You should come over and take a look at it. It was really quite impressive.
Great.
A lot of artists in this community.
I think we're all artists, just some are better than others, Councilor.
These kids are better than most of us, that's the one.
I'm really good at stick figures. City manager, any comments?
Yes, I'd like to, on behalf of staff, thank counselors and community members for your ongoing notes of appreciation and kind comments and emails. We really do appreciate the feedback, and we don't say thank you enough for those in the community who have been providing that note of appreciation, those comments of appreciation, and we really do appreciate those. So thank you.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On a somewhat similar note, I've been seeing a lot more activity from City of Salem on Facebook, so thank you for that, as far as letting people know kind of what's going on. And then secondly, last week I was in Washington, D.C. With the League of Oregon Cities, and we also had Mayor Peterson and Councilor Anderson as representatives from the city of Salem. We had 46 elected or city administration personnel and like 20 to 30 junior and senior high school kids. We had real good meetings with Senators Merkley and Wyden, and then staff for all of the House reps. Made a lot of good contacts, gave a lot of good input across the board. So always important to talk to their staff in DC that they listen to very intently, and so making those contacts so that we have a straight avenue to deliver information or comments in regards to legislation up on the Hill is well worth it. Thank you, Councilor. And having spent a career going back there and calling on people in the delegation, how the heck did you get 75 people in one of those offices? Most of the time, we were about a dozen when we were talking to the House staff. We actually met in one of the Senate hearing rooms with Merkley and Wyden. I know last time we had to meet in a hearing room for them. But it's always great for the high schoolers to actually, and we let them essentially, after we covered a quick 3 points, actually grill the senators quite well. And you'll notice that of the 3 who attended from the city of Salem, I was the only one who could actually make it back here. And following with the comments, I'd be remiss if I didn't comment that the mayor is ill today. That's why you've got me up here blundering along as I go, and he's shaking and pale to my right, wondering what I'm going to do next that isn't proper. But the mayor is ill, and I suspect got the dreaded airline cold on her way out back there, and took ill during the meetings, and so you get a lot of I have more admiration than I had before with the mayor, how well she does this, how graciously she does this, how smoothly she runs these meetings. It's a little more intimidating when you get up here and start doing this stuff, and try not to stumble over your tongue or do anything really bad, But we all hope the mayor gets well quickly. Definitely. Okay, public comment. Got Andrew Hendry. Hi, Andrew. You're going to have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address of the ward you're in. After 2 minutes, the red light or the yellow light's going to come on blinking, and you've got 1 minute to wrap up. And when the red light comes on, we'll ask you to wrap it up pretty quickly. So, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Andrew Hendry. I live I'm the chair of Salem Historic Landmarks Commission. I live at 3220 Crestview Drive South. I believe that's in Ward 7, I'm pretty sure. I'm here tonight to present you guys with our 2015 accomplishments and 2016 work plan, which is an item later on your agenda, but I'm just going to quickly read the letter that I put in the front into the record. We are pleased to present you with our 2015 accomplishments and 2016 work plan for the City of Salem Historic Landmarks Commission. I am proud of the work that city staff has put in over the last year that has made all of our accomplishments in 2015 possible. With their continued help, I believe that we can complete our 2016 goals. The implementation of the Salem Heritage Neighborhood Program was a huge success. We helped Grant Neighborhood, the program's first heritage neighborhood, in completing several projects, including a historic calendar featuring photos from their neighborhood. The calendar was used as a tool to raise funds towards future preservation projects in their area. Additionally, our residential toolbox grant program awarded $10,683 to help community members take on the hard work of maintaining their historic resources. You will find more accomplishments in this document, but these are my highlights. As we look to the coming year, I'm excited to uphold the management of our historic resources. The toolbox grant program will continue to provide incentive to Salem citizens who have historic properties to maintain and improve. We hope to launch seismic upgrade grants during the second cycle of the program this year. We have taken steps to lay down a foundation for social media outreach, creating a photo database to share historic photos with the community. In 2016, we hope to leverage this into more community interest and an opportunity to educate the community. The HLC has many goals, but these are the top priorities for me. I greatly appreciate the City Council and Mayor for supporting our historic efforts and your continued faith in our commission to successfully complete the good work of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service and all you're doing for our historical buildings in the town. You have any comments, any questions from the council? Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I've noticed the last 3 or 4 weeks I've been seeing Flashback Fridays with pictures of historical buildings. Is that your guys' doings, or?
I'm not 100% sure. I think in part it is. We've put together a photo database of many photos through the databases that the library has. About 400 pictures, I think, is what we have in all. For a while, I was posting those, but then city, just the way that the things needed to run, it had to become a city staff running it. So I haven't been as in the middle of it as I was 8 or 9 months ago. But I've been trying to retweet stuff. We're just trying to gain as much as we can. So we're trying to do flashbacks as often as we can. We have a nice series of photos of them putting the gold man up on top and of the Capitol, and natural, I don't know if disasters is the right word, but we have great pictures of the Willamette being completely iced over with big chunks of ice, and we're trying to get anyone interested in our programs that we can, and get as many people to come to our meetings as we can. And we're slowly having some effect in the positive, I think.
Excellent, yeah, because they're great photos.
Yeah.
Before and after kind of as well, and real good, just historical documentation of original building construction and modification, which I'm always just fascinated in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it, so we're moving on to the consent calendar. Okay. Councilor Nanki, got a motion for me on the consent calendar?
I've been waiting all day for it.
I thought you were, that's why I asked.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move the consent calendar as it is presented with no polls.
Moved and seconded by Councilor Nanki, seconded by Councilor Dickey, to approve the consent calendar as written. Councilor Nanki, you want to talk
Mr.
about
Chair,
what's in there?
We have several things on the agenda this evening. We have a City of Salem Enterprise Zone boundary amendment to include approximately 57 acres at the Mill Creek Corporate Center. We have establishment of new classification and salary ranges for the Assistant Fire Chief of Operations, the Financial Services Administrator. We have a specialized salary adjustment for police lieutenants. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Portland for police services at the 2016 IAAF World Indoor Championships, where they will pay us to have our folks come up and assist them. And then finally, we have an application for funding from the Energy Trust of Oregon to install a high-efficiency blower at Willow Lake Water Pollution Control Facility that will save us money and improve efficiencies out at the waste treatment plant.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I'm still going 8:15.
Okay, we're going to reopen public comment here. We've got a person that wants to come up and speak, so come up. Again, you've got 3 minutes. State your name, the ward you're in, and after 2 minutes, the yellow light will come on. After 3, the red light will come on. You'll have to wrap it up.
Okay, Councilor McCoy, thank you very much. It's my error. I see that this public comment time is actually 4 agenda items. I won't be speaking to the agenda, so I'll wait.
Excuse me, sir, you'll need to wait till the end of the meeting. There's a public comment period at the end of the meeting. There's
Yes.
another gentleman who wants to talk about an agenda item.
Yes,
So
that's what I'm going to be doing.
About an agenda item?
No,
Or
not an agenda item.
Okay. Sorry. We'll get your name.
Welcome. State your name, the ward you live in, or your address, and you heard my spiel there. You got 3 minutes.
All right. Appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Richard Chesbro. I live at 2277 Orchard Heights. in West Salem. And my wife Barbara and I are the owners of the Willamette Queen Stern Wheeler here in town. And I'm speaking to, and I don't know the agenda item. Can you help me with that? What? 9.2A? 9.2A. I failed to write that down in my notes. Pertaining to a concern we have with a charge, a fee that we were charged during our inspection, Coast Guard inspection last year. I'm sure you all recall the Willamette Queen sitting up in the parking lot over at Wallace Marine Park for considerably longer than we anticipated. But when you're dealing with the Coast Guard, you just never know what they're going to do. The expense of this haul out was far greater than we expected, and the hard cost as well as the lost business for our small company to absorb. In fact, we ended the year over $8,000 in the red, primarily because of that haul out. However, at the end of the haul out, we were surprised with a additional bill for $6,000 some odd dollars, almost $7,000, as an additional fee for the parking lot time that we spent in the park. We were caught by surprise by this, and probably through an oversight of my wife and I, plus the contractor, we just didn't read that in the agreement that we had signed with the Public Works Department. We were told when we met with Public Works that there would be, the only fee they could apply to Wallace Marine Park was a special use fee of $131 per day, which is the rental of the entire park. We agreed to this because we understood that during our haul out, we'd only be out of the water just a few days in addition to the time to go in and out of the water. And we also understood that when we were being hauled out of the water, it would be closed to the public. So we totally understood, and we did pay that fee. However, during our time up on the blocks, we were parked off to the side, and never was the public inconvenienced in any way, either with launching their vessels or with parking their vehicles. So we feel that to charge us the full rate of $131 a day for the time that we were simply in the parking lot is unreasonable and just a little excessive. We have a parking fee arrangement for Riverfront Park, and we ourselves rent a parking spot for $20 a month in Riverfront Park, and we just don't understand why that same fee couldn't have been applied, in our case, at the park across the river. And of course, while we were out of the water, we still paid our lease fee at Riverfront Park as well as the parking fee. So we are simply asking for the council to be reasonable and do what's right, and we'd appreciate any consideration in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions?
Questions for me? Or?
I would put in one of those new parking meters.
No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm closing the public comment. Moving on to public hearings, right? Public hearings, first is 4A. This is an adoption of an order. And the council has already voted on this item, and it is only in adopting an order. And I ask Councilor Bennett to make a motion here to adopt the order.
Okay. I'm just looking for my note. I will just move staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Bennett and seconded by Councilor Nanki to move the staff recommendation on item 4A on the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Do we have a roll call now? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now.
I still think we need to change code.
Okay, we're going to open a public hearing now. Let's see who's right here. And this is a request to initiate an eminent domain to acquire property interests. City Recorder, will you announce the hearing?
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding a request to initiate eminent domain proceedings from River Valley Terrace LLC for property located at 1710 Wallace Road Northwest. The criteria applicable to this application are Salem Revised Code Section 200.050D. The hearing will be conducted with a staff presentation first, followed by the applicant, neighborhood association, and other interested persons, and the applicant's rebuttal.
Okay, now we have the city attorney who's going to provide a staff report for us.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Dan Atchison, City Attorney. We have a public hearing tonight subject to SRC Chapter 200 to a request to initiate eminent domain to acquire a property. So some of the background on this: River Valley Terrace LLC is the developer in this application. Rich and Stephanie Fry are the members. They're developing a 60-unit apartment complex located at 1710 Wallace Road Northwest. The improvement that's in question here is an extension of Hope Avenue. It's a required improvement for the development, and we'll get into what that means later. So Hope Avenue essentially will serve as a connection between Wallace Road and the future Marine Drive. So SRC 200.050D requires developers to convey clean title to public improvements to the city. So when a developer has to build a street or a sewer system or something like that, they have to, it's a requirement of their development, and they've got to build it and then basically convey it to the city or get the city to accept it. And in order to do that, the land that improvement sits on has to have clear title. So we don't take property with easements, with liens on it, that sort of thing. So SRC 200 allows a developer, if not successful in acquiring a necessary property interest, to request that the city acquire the interest through eminent domain. So the issues for tonight are, you have two questions to answer basically. The first question is, has the developer made good faith efforts to acquire the property interest? And should the city acquire the property interest, including the use of eminent domain if necessary? So SRC 200.050 provides council considerable discretion in making these determinations. There really is no criteria beyond just baldly answering these questions. A little bit more about the background. You've got quite a bit of testimony recently regarding the subject of the hearing. What this hearing is not about are the prior land use decisions that got us to this point that authorized either the subdivision or the apartment complex. And this hearing is not about the policy choice that designated this Hope Avenue as a connection point between Wallace Road and Marine Drive. So here's a map of the area. As you can see, it's a bit hard to tell with the map there, but the yellow area you see highlighted, that's actually an easement. It's an easement to the next door property owner. The cross-hatched area there is property owned by the developer. And the smaller crosshatch area up to the north of that is the area that's being developed by the developer. The little circle you see there above where it says area of acquisition, that's the actual area that the property interest that we're trying to acquire. It's about a 30-foot by 60-foot stretch of property. So what the developer is required to do is build this Hope Avenue extension from Wallace Road, going east and then curving north and then east again. So some of the facts related to this application: Hope Avenue improvement is located entirely within property owned by the developer. The improvement is a requirement of the Urban Growth Area Preliminary Declaration that was issued back in 2006. The portion of the area to be improved is encumbered by an access easement benefiting the next door neighbor, and the developer must remove this encumbrance before they can convey the property to the city. So far, the developer has been unable to negotiate a release of this property interest from the developer, or from the adjacent property owner, excuse me. Here's a little bit better map of that area. It's a little bit closer in. You can see the crosshatch area in the middle there. That's the actual area we're trying to acquire. The easement we're talking about runs essentially from Wallace Road back across where future Hope Avenue is going to be, and then spurs down to the south to the Johnson property, who's the adjacent property owner. So the two questions you have to answer are, did the developer make good faith efforts to acquire the property, and if so, do you want to initiate eminent domain to acquire it for the city? So in July and June 2014, the developer offered to relocate the Johnson's access point and to relocate the Johnson's water line, which runs through this easement area. At that point, the Johnsons informed the developer that they wanted the developer to pay for their attorney to review the matter. There was about a year delay between future contact, as far as I know, and the developer and their representatives are here tonight, and they can talk more about that. But in August 2015, the developer made another written offer that was again to relocate the Johnsons' water line, to pave the Johnsons' access easement, to extinguish the developer's own access and irrigation easement that runs over the Johnsons' property, to build a chain link fence for the Johnsons to separate their property from the apartments that are being constructed, and to relocate an underground power line serving the Johnsons' property, or to actually relocate and underground a power line that serves the Johnsons' property. The developer estimated that the offered improvements are worth approximately $15,000. The Johnsons hired an attorney, and in October 15 responded by demanding everything that developer had offered, plus they wanted a vinyl fence instead of chain link, and they wanted the developer to construct a new sewer line for the Johnsons, and they also requested a $45,000 payment to the Johnsons for what they deemed severance damages to the easement and reduction in value to their property from the impact of the apartments that are going in adjacent to them. Based on the exhibits that are in your staff report, staff recommends that you find that the developer has made good faith efforts to acquire the property interest. Assuming you come to that determination, the next question you have to ask is, do you want the city to acquire the property, including the use of eminent domain? A couple facts regarding that. So the Hope Avenue extension is a requirement by the city for the proposed development. And once completed, that Hope Avenue extension will be turned over to the city and will be a city-owned improvement. The transportation system plan identifies this section of Hope Avenue as a connecting street between Wallace Road and Marine Drive, so it serves more than just this one development. If the developer isn't able to convey clear title, the city can't accept the street, and the result will be the private street with an easement running across it, resulting in potential safety issues. And the acquisition is necessary to complete the public improvement and is in the public interest. Based on the information provided by the developer, I would recommend that you find, one, that they did make good faith efforts, and two, that the city does go forward to acquire the property. If you do make that decision, some facts to know is that SRC 200 provides that the developer is obligated to pay all of the city's acquisition costs. So whatever we determine through appraisal that the acquisition cost of this easement interest is, we'll need to pay that, or the developer will need to pay that, as well as any attorney fees and court costs related to any acquisition. So we've spoken to the developer about this previously. We've told the developer that we're going to require that the developer provide a deposit to the city before we go forward. And in the end, if we do have to go to eminent domain, if the city attorney's office and the city's real estate division is unable to acquire this property through an arm's length transaction, and we do opt to go through eminent domain, the city will most likely be hiring outside counsel to represent the city in that matter. I just wanted you to know that up front. So our recommendation is that the council adopt resolution 2016-10, which finds that the developer has made good faith efforts to acquire the property interests and authorizes staff to acquire the property, including the use of eminent domain if necessary. And the applicant's representatives are here. You're welcome to ask questions now of me, or you can wait till testimony is done. I'm happy to provide answers.
Okay, councilors have any questions, or do you want to have the testimony first? Seeing none? Take the testimony first. We'll ask questions afterwards. Hello. You need your name for the record and where you live and who you're representing. And again, as a reminder, you've got 15 minutes to present your side of the case here.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the council. For the record, my name is Mark Shipman. I'm a real estate and land use attorney with Sawfield Griggs. My office is located at 250 Church Street Southeast, Suite 200, Salem 97301. I'm here this evening on this matter on behalf of River Valley Terrace, LLC, the property owner on which land the easement crosses, and also the requester of this resolution that's before you this evening. Dan did a great job with respect to outlining our request and also identifying a lot of what I would consider to be some of the ancillary issues that are surrounding it. As Dan indicated, my client is obligated to put in Hope Avenue Northwest. This was required as a part of their urban growth area permit and their subdivision approval back in 2006, 2007. So they're required to dedicate this property to the city, and they're required to dedicate this property free and clear of all encumbrances. And this easement that runs across the very northerly portion of my client's property is actually 15 feet in width and 60 feet, well, it's 15 by 60. So we're talking about an area that is approximately 910 square feet is all that needs to be taken at this point. My client is in the process of building a multi-phase project. They first did a single-family. They first completed a single-family development located to the north of the hatched area, and also surrounding to the east and also to the southeast. Where the hatched area is above the arrows is a second phase of the development, and that second phase consists of 60 needed housing units. They're multifamily housing that is being proposed and is actually being constructed on the property right now. That was approved by the city as a part of Phase 2. As a part of that Phase 2 approval, my client was obligated to dedicate and improve this New Hope Avenue extension. That's why we're here this evening. We're following the letter of the law in this case. We're not trying to skirt anything. We're not asking for any special favors. My client has actually walked through the good faith efforts by providing 2 letters to you, and these are copies of letters that were sent to the Johnson family, and we're going to reference the Johnson as the property owners. My client is being the developer in this case. So we've had at least 2 offers made to the property owner, and we've also had conversations by the developer and the property owners with respect to acquiring that 15-foot by 60-foot easement on my client's property. In spite of the multiple offers made by my client over the past 2 years, or over years, I should say, the property owner has refused to accept them and is demanding monetary and public works improvements that are far beyond what SRC 200 contemplates. This right-of-way is necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare of the community, and it was required by the City of Salem, and there's no other way to acquire it but through this action this evening. Dan mentioned near the end of his presentation that there's some additional letters that you've received from some community members with respect to this condemnation request. Not so much with respect to the condemnation request, but really more towards the subdivision and UGA application that occurred back in 2006, 2007, and things that should have been done back prior to that time or during the time of 2006, 2007. And frankly, those are irrelevant tonight. You shouldn't consider those. Those are essentially somewhat of an attack with respect to the underlying urban growth area permit and the subdivision application that have already been approved. And there's no way to appeal them at this point. With respect to one of the points that Dan pointed out to as far as the deposit for the costs, my client, the developer, is aware that they have to pay all the costs. They're prepared to do that. In fact, they've already deposited with the city a $25,000 letter of credit and in anticipation of this. So in order to kind of wind this up on our end, I really don't have anything more to add except to say that we satisfy the good faith efforts. This is necessary for public safety. My client has met all the elements, and I would urge that you move and approve staff recommendation as put forth before you this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, we'll hold questions till the after we've gone through the hearing, if that's okay, Mark.
Well, I thought this would be the time for it.
You want them now? You want them now? Okay.
Thank you,
Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. The easements for utilities that apparently run through this same area?
There's only one easement.
Just the water line?
It's just the, Councilor Nankini, it's an access and irrigation easement that runs through there. There is a water line that runs through the developer's property, but the Johnson family, which has the easement on this area, and they live, actually, their home is to the west, they actually don't have an easement over the developer's property for the water line. That was one of the offers that we had tried to provide them early on, was that we wanted to give them an easement for their domestic line. They don't have one. The utilities that run over the access way that we're looking to take only relate to access and irrigation.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause it was like, if there's an underground utility, would that become then a city's easement over time? Or were we coming outside of that easement to actually rerun, say, the electrical as well as water or sewer that?
All other utilities would be run outside of this easement area.
And outside from underneath the roadway itself?
They may be running within the right-of-way.
Okay.
As permitted by...
Because then it would be city right-of-way is
by
kind of
city
where I was
code,
going.
correct.
Okay. That's all I had. Thanks.
Councilor Benjamin, then Councilor Lewis.
If the eminent domain was to move forward, are those offers still on the table for the other party?
No.
No, okay.
Councilor Lewis?
Actually, never mind.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Bauer.
In your assessment of this, is there anything about basically doing the eminent domain on this easement that would affect the value of the Johnson property for future development?
No. You know, what's interesting is that the Johnsons are going to get a paved driveway into their property. Their property, I believe, is zoned RM1, so it's multifamily right now. They could develop that. They're going to have access to a right now their access way. Guess Councilor Bauer is a dirt path or road, and they use it. It's functional for them, but we're going to be putting in a 32-foot wide paved city street to city standards with curbs and gutters, and so it's going to be a much, in my mind, it would be a better way for them to be able to access out onto Wallace Road.
Thank
you. Any other questions? No? Thank you.
I did ask him to speak up. If speakers could speak loudly, please, we have someone
Okay.
with a hearing.
There's Mr. Johnson here, and he can't hear half of what's being said, so that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, we'll remember that. Thank you. Mark, anything else before you wrap it up?
Nothing else.
No more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, next, do we have anybody representing the Neighborhood Association? Nope. Okay, next we'll go to members of the public. There it is. I do have it. I have the list. Okay, now it's going to be members of the public who have signed up to testify. You'll be given 3 minutes. Please come up and state your name and your ward number or address. After 2 minutes, the yellow light will come on. You'll have 1 minute left to wrap up, and after 3 minutes, the red light will come on. So first, we've got E.M. Easterly.
Good evening, Chairman McCoy, members of the City Council. Thank you very much. I have 3 requests. First, I ask that you postpone action on the condemnation request. Second, I ask that you keep the record open for the next 21 days. Third, I request that you review whether this condemnation will facilitate the construction of, quote, public street improvements for Hope Avenue from Wallace Road to Marine Drive, unquote. or whether the River Valley subdivision as platted complies with the tentative subdivision development plan number 0610, affirmed by the Salem City Council August 21st, 2006, and the associated UGA development permit number 06-6. Tonight, council members are being asked to initiate a taking on behalf of one property owner over another in order to fulfill obligations imposed upon the first property owners by the city of Salem 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the city granted Mr. Fry and his wife tentative approval for a mixed-use subdivision on a multifamily zone parcel. One of the conditions of the approval required that the Frys to eventually link their subdivision to Wallace Road via parcel of land they did not own. Why the Frys agreed to this off-site subdivision approval condition strains my understanding. Nevertheless, in 2012, the Frys purchased 1710 Wallace Road. That is encumbered with the easement that we are discussing this evening. Why the easement was not addressed in the original 2006 subdivision approval is also a mystery to me. Over the next 3 weeks, I would like to provide clear documentation that the River Valley subdivision was flawed and its execution has failed to meet the tentative subdivision conditions affirmed by the council and failed to comply with the UGA Development Permit 06-6. I will leave it to you, the council, to determine whether these failures rise to the level of an imperfect judgment or something greater. Please note, the recitals contained in the resolution 0610 offered by Mr. Atchison appear to be legally flawed. I see I've run out of time.
You run out of
Thank you
time.
very much for your indulgence in listening.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Eastwood.
Thank you.
Next, we have Evan White. Welcome. You're a veteran here. You know the whole dance here. So go ahead, Evan.
I apologize for inflicting myself on you again. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, and guest councilors. I am Evan White, and I live in Ward 7, so this issue is outside my home turf. However, I've listened to the importance that you place on the third bridge, and most recently I heard our mayor say that she will never waver in her support for the third bridge. And so several years ago I became interested in learning how it came to be that a subdivision planned and built by the current chair of the Planning Commission came to be planned, approved, and built right in the path of the proposed street that would connect with the third bridge. I toured the area and felt compassion for the people who live there, who scrimped and saved to buy what for them was, in many cases, their very first home, only to learn that their home would either be demolished or located right next to a 4-lane highway. I became further interested last August after learning that Mr. Fry had built his subdivision without the required geological assessment. Then I noticed that there was a plan to ask the city to condemn property for the benefit of Mr. Fry. At that point, I filed a series of public record requests to get a better sense of what was going on. The first of these was November 9th, 2015, and you have that in your packet. There were several other public records requests. After reviewing the answers, I concluded that staff had improperly shown favoritism toward Mr. Fry for the reasons cited in my letter to the Marion County District Attorney, which you also have in your packet. Staff showed favoritism by not enforcing the city regulation that required a geological assessment, by not enforcing the city regulation that required Mr. Fry to obtain and pay for an excavation and fill permit, by informally allowing Mr. Fry to defer expensive street improvements, and by allowing Mr. Fry to design a subdivision partially outside the urban growth boundary. This is a classic example of bait and switch development and monumental poor planning. I concur with the recommendation of Mr. Easterly. The City Council should not initiate eminent domain proceedings at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Question? Councilor Lewis?
Well, just one comment. If I'm not mistaken, the houses that you're talking about that might be disrupted in the event that the third bridge goes through and Hope Avenue goes through, those houses were built in 2006, 2007, well before the preferred alternative identified Hope Avenue as the access from the bridge to Wallace. So
I'm aware of that, but there was also talk of where it would go at that time.
you know, there's been talk about a bridge for decades. The significance of Hope Avenue in conjunction with the third bridge did not become significant in my mind until just recently with the preferred alternative being accepted by this council. So I don't see a connection when these homes were built, other than Hope Avenue was identified on a plan as a potential street connecting Wallace and Marine Drive.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Evan. Next is Susan Kaltwasser. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Kaltwasser, and thank you for getting it correct. I live in Ward 8. I was asked to take a look at this land use case. I don't know Mr. Johnson or any of the parties involved, but with my 25 years of experience, people said, could you look at this? It looks a little funny to me. And so I looked at all the public records that were made available to me, and two things jumped out at me right away that I wanted to make comment on. One is that this is not a simple case, and I do encourage you to go back and look at the records that are available, have legal look at it, as well as the current Public Works Director, because it looks like some issues were not followed through properly to me, especially regarding the funds for the future Marine Drive. I'm sure that the council wants to capture all the revenue that's possible, and I think that should be looked at. But the other issue had to do with Hope Drive and the way it is configured on the map, the illustration that you see there. Back in 1997, the city did a plat in the Salem Transportation Plan for Hope Drive, showing that it would be connected straight through from Wallace Road to Marine Drive. And that makes a logical sense, regardless of whether or not there's going to be a third bridge or not. And part of the job of the city of Salem is to design streets so that they have a logical pattern and so that they allow for the development of all properties in the future. And by just merely making a simple adjustment to the requirements of the developer, I think that the city can find itself in a better position against the threat of a takings litigation. And that would be to extend Hope Drive as a fully developed street straight through to the Johnson properties. And then, of course, in that street, development requirement would be to replace all of the infrastructures and services that might be disrupted. That way, if at some point that property, whether by the Johnsons or some other persons, that property could be fully developed as an RM zone land. And then that then would be the fulfillment of your obligation to show that you are meeting the public good by requiring that street improvement. Are there any questions?
Questions?
I would concur that you need to keep the record open, if for no other reason, not the record open, but not take action tonight, so that all of these things could actually be looked at. We have put all the documents into the public record, which will be to the advantage of Mr. Johnson if he wants to proceed forwards with the takings. But it's one of those things where it's been presented to you as a simple idea, but it's really very complex. And by denying this process of going forward with eminent domain, that gives you the opportunity to look at all these issues in a timely fashion and consider whether or not this is exactly what you want to do or whether or not there's other things that you might want to consider at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Gerald Johnson.
Hi.
Welcome.
Oh, wait a minute, is it working? Okay. First of all, I probably need 6 minutes, not 3. I live at 1720 Wallace Road. My name is Gerald J. Johnson. We built our home there 52 years ago. We still had cows around then. But just so you know, what is, for one thing, I've heard mention of the third bridge, which I've heard many times. When we built our house 51, 52 years ago, at that time they were down below us surveying for the third bridge. Anybody know that? Or you're all too young? But that's true. Now, they have been back to our property 2 to 3 times, hired by the city of Salem to survey the third bridge again. I have a shop. It has one of the medallions or whatever they call it the surveyors put down. He said, oh, you might as well bury it. We'll have to come back again. So that's the third bridge deal. We dealt with that all those years. Now the other thing is, we're talking about, that was Hope Avenue going to hook on back then too. No different than the last one they picked. The other thing is that they come along and I've heard said that we didn't have an easement for our water, and we didn't. We had good neighbors in those days, and we didn't have to get a written easement. There wasn't any easement mentioned until Mr. Fry came along without us, which he has a right to do, bought the property so he could take the easement that we have coming in and then complain that we have a water line in his property. Now, these are pretty unfair stuff, pretty unfair. And Mrs. Johnson and I have dealt with this for a long time. We've been dealing with the Fry, Mr. Fry. We have no objections to what Mr. Fry says or anything else. It's just that a lot of the things aren't that. Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. All right. That adds a minute on here. Anyway, I didn't have to have an easement. We used to shake hands on things, okay? No easement was mentioned until he bought the property. And he bought the property, as we know, because he had to have that property to put his Hope Avenue in so he could build the apartments. Pretty easy figuring there. So anyway, we're not asking to cause a lot of trouble or anything else. We've had plenty of trouble coming our way. And I think we have more coming to us than the developers have coming to them. And the city, Mr. Davis, told me this could never happen until everything was settled with us. And lo and behold, here comes an excavator, and they gave him a permit. Now one comes with Public Works, but they don't talk to the Planning Commission, you see. They're across the hall somewhere or something, but there's no communication there. I guess I've said my piece for now. Oh, I still got more time.
We were giving you more time, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Johnson? Councilor Benjamin.
Do you have any other plans for your future development of your property?
I beg your pardon?
Do you have any plans for future development of your
Do not.
property?
Do
Oh.
not.
Okay.
We were there all by ourselves for many years, and that's what we wanted. I don't mean that other things can't come in and come around you. I don't mean that at all.
Right.
It's just that everything is kind of mixed up and bass-accurate, and we have to we're the ones that are caught in the middle of this whole thing. We're surrounded by Fry development now. We're not surrounded, but on 3 sides is Fry development. And we're locked in down there now. My family, or our family, used to own the property that Fry bought, so we had no problems with our road. And I also heard mention, sorry, I know it's not your question, about the muddy road coming in. It wasn't a muddy road until they came in and cut all the trees down, and they ran equipment across it and muddied it up. That's it. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Be sure to if you pull in the intimate domain, and my wife is in a wheelchair, and she has to be able to get in and out of anything temporary made. She's disabled. So this has been very hard for us, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. David Van Atta.
I get 3 minutes as well.
Hi, David. Yes, you do. You have 3 minutes. After 2, the yellow light will come on. After 3, the red light comes on.
All right, I got
your
a couple
name and
notes.
speak into the microphone. Your name and where you live or your ward number.
All right.
Please.
Can I remove my jacket, Council? Do you mind if I start timer as well? I know there's a little light, but I like to note time, keep track of it all. That'll take too much time. So how about we go with...
You ready?
Roll
Hit
now.
the button, please.
Name is David Van Atta. My address is 649 River Valley Drive, northwest, is it? Yep, we're at lot 8, so we're right in the middle, right above the V on River Valley Drive on the slide there. I was talking to Mr. Johnson earlier today, and he was saying that his property used to extend all the way to the top of River Valley down to Johnson, where it says Johnson's property, and all the way down to the slough, close to the river. They used to own all of that, and now, like he said, they're kind of squared in around by the Fries. But I wrote down a few notes here that I want to talk about, and then kind of share my opinions. You mentioned that this is not about the any prior discussions, Dan, and any future decisions. We find ourselves in a little predicament here because we're talking about putting in an easement or acquiring an easement that would eventually end up having to be ripped out if we ended up using the preferred alternative for the bridge, right? Is that correct? So Hope Avenue would extend all the way down, and then the bridge would extend over across the Willamette River. So Salem River Revised Code, Chapter 77, under roadway improvements and permitting, states that if you improve a roadway, 10 years has to go by before you can improve that roadway again. So we're putting in a 30-foot roadway with what's supposed to be a 60-foot right-of-way, and then we're going to have to tear that out, or I guess this puts the bridge off another 10 years. So, I mean, I guess we've been waiting 52, why not add another 10, I guess. Another few notes. I noticed that Dan said we plan to, what is that? I guess would be sub out the legal for this. We sounds pretty like it's already a done deal. Kind of a, I don't know, slap in the face for people showing up today. But then, let's see here. I think that Mr. Fry has made attempts But as we all know, he has to, what is it called there? How is it written? Good faith attempts. So he's made good faith attempts, something like that. Good faith attempts is very undefined. And I believe that the offer still sits on the table, and I just think that we're coming to this a little bit too early. So back to the discussion of the bridge. This neighborhood was built in 2006. We're going to tear it out, supposedly soon, to put in a new bridge. I mean, we're just kind of running over our steps. We need to step back, take a look at Hope Avenue, see where it's supposed to come through, because it was supposed to come through right where those houses are. That's where it was planned. So I just feel that we're rushing to conclusions, and I believe that what Suzanne said.
Okay, the red light has come on. I'm not sure what your timer says, but ours says 3 minutes, so if you could wrap up, we'd appreciate it.
I will. Simple but complex. I liked the way that Suzanne put that. This is a very complex issue. It involves ODOT, bridge, city, county. I mean, it involves a lot. So I would just ask that you consider that before voting tonight, to jump to conclusions and have the city go ahead and acquire this property.
Okay,
With
thank
that,
you.
I'll leave it at that.
Any
Oh,
questions?
Could one more thing? That was a nice road he had.
Okay. Any questions for David? Thank you, David, for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the public testimony. Does anybody else have anything to say, want to consider? Okay, do we go questions of staff?
You can do questions of staff now and then applicant.
Yeah, then he can.
Okay, we're going to do questions of staff right now, Mark, and then get back to your rebuttal after.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Anybody have questions of staff, counselors? Counselor Lewis?
Yeah, I think this might be a Peter question. It looks like one of the motivations behind this is to align Hope Avenue as the main access for the folks living in this area, to access Wallace Boulevard. Can you speak to that as opposed to where they access today?
I'm sorry, Counselor, I don't understand your question.
There seems to be a level of common sense to have the people who live in the single-family residential and the potential of the apartments to access Wallace Boulevard from the Hope Avenue extension that's going to be built. Now they access Wallace Boulevard a different way.
Right.
I'd like to have you speak about the benefit of having that extension as opposed to what's there today.
Oh, certainly. I have not personally been out to this subdivision, but my recollection is that Valley Street Northwest, that little tail that connects River Valley Drive to Wallace Road, was always a temporary improvement pending the completion of what is now called River Valley Drive Northwest. So it's the extension of Hope Avenue to the east. That will be a full local street improvement that, albeit curvilinear, will connect Wallace Road to the future Marine Drive, which you can see that the subdivision, when it was platted the Marine Drive requirement. So you see the Marine Drive right-of-way sitting there. So that would be a fully complete local street improvement as opposed to what they have today.
Other questions? Yes, Councilor Bauer.
Has there been a date for building the third bridge that's been established? I wasn't aware that there has been one.
No, in fact, guest Councilor Bauer, there is no council decision on the third bridge. The last decision that the council made was comments to the draft EIS, the environmental impact statement alignment, and those comments were provided to the committee that's reviewing the alignment, but there is no city action on the third bridge today. So we can, there certainly was no third bridge in 2006, and even today, if this subdivision were to come in today, we would not have authority to do anything because council has not acted officially on the third bridge.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter, I want to make sure I understand. There's been testimony about Hope going through to Marine Drive, and as you look at this, the way I look at it, you start on Hope, and you end up on River Valley Drive, and that's what connects, would then connect to Marine Drive in the future if and when that's built? Is that right?
What, when the city did the, we did an alignment survey for Marine Drive and for certain connections to Marine Drive, including Hope Avenue, which showed Hope Avenue to be a direct connection from Wallace Road to Marine Drive. What the council adopted was simply the alignment of Marine Drive, but not the alignment of the local streets. And that's fairly consistent with city practice, that arterials and collectors alignments are often adopted, but local street connections are not. So local street connections are often left to private developers to lay out in their subdivisions. So what you see today is a curvilinear connection, and at the time in '06 when this subdivision was came through for approval, we saw that Hope Avenue wouldn't go all the way through, but our intent at the time was to make sure that there was a local street connection between Wallace Road and Marine Drive, and in fact you see the ultimate connection. It just happens to be a curvilinear connection instead of a direct connection.
Okay, so I want to make, so the testimony we heard saying, well, wait a minute, you're not following whatever the original plan was with a direct straight line connection on Hope Drive to Marine Drive, is now not in consideration.
Well, it's not in consideration.
It's not, with what we've got here, this
Correct.
This is a replacement.
Correct.
Okay.
The council, the survey that was done showed an alignment for Marine Drive. When the survey was done for Marine Drive, there was a direct alignment for Hope Avenue extending directly east from Wallace Road to Marine Drive. But that piece, that local street piece, was not adopted by the City Council. The only thing that was officially adopted was the alignment of Marine Drive.
And so when you're referencing Marine Drive on this illustration, is it the road up there above, arcing above Salmon River? Is that?
It is the one that parallels to the east, Salmon River Street Northwest.
Okay.
And that is, in fact, I assume that is a 60-foot right-of-way that was dedicated, because that is exactly where Marine Drive, the alignment was adopted.
Okay, thank you. So another question, I'm not sure, this might be to you, Dan. Were the offers, I've not dealt with this before, so were the offers that you described and we saw in the staff report from Mr. Fry to Mr. Johnson, were those typical? Were those lowball in it? Were those average? I mean, I don't know, one of these issues, what's a good offer or what's an offer that's sort of standard here?
Council, basically, this is a little odd in that they're trying to acquire an interest in an easement by replacing it with a local street. So it's a little hard to value and come up with an appraised value of what that would be worth, because you could argue that it's actually improving his access, so there is no taking, so to speak. So they tried to be creative and come up with some solutions that offered him different benefits, such as paving his driveway, such as moving the utilities around and whatnot, building a fence for him. Because there's really no way you could put a dollar amount on taking away a small swath of an easement and replacing it with a city street. So this is not typical of what you would typically see. Oftentimes you'd see an appraisal and a check. And it's not really, it's hard to do that in this case because of the nature of the property interest.
So I guess, so if this was a road going right through his property to Marine Drive, let's say, and Mr. Johnson was in the same stance, didn't want to sell, didn't want to do it, it went anyway, then what would happen? There would be an appraiser that came, and since he'd lost a chunk of his property, there'd be some...
Exactly. So what we would require is an appraisal from the developer's representative saying this is what we plan on taking, this is what the comparables are, this is what we believe the just compensation would be. And then there'd be a series of written communications from the developer to the property owner, as there are in this case, saying this is what we believe the property is worth, this is how much we're offering. And that's what they've done in this case. But in this case, they've tried to be creative with the compensation because, you know, a negative dollar amount or a nominal dollar amount, which is what the actual just compensation would be, really isn't, you know, they try to be, in my mind, they tried to be considerate of what it would take to get the property.
Okay. Councilor Benjamin.
So it seems like that there was a plan of some sort, but not adopted, for Hope Drive to be kind of straight through way back when. But because of that property is owned by private owners, when developers come in and purchase the property and they develop it, be it single family, multifamily, commercial, whatever it may be, then but if nothing did get built around that area, it would be a straight line right through the Johnson's property, kind of going to what Councilor McCoy said. So then there'd be a larger eminent domain issue.
That's correct, Counselor. If the city were to be doing this project,
right,
say we had money back in 97 when the alignment was, or 98 when the alignment was adopted, then we would have been in a situation where we would have been going through and acquiring all these properties, including a significant chunk of Mr. Johnson's property, to put Hope Avenue directly through to Wallace Road.
And since it wasn't adopted, though, but still needs to be a connection, which there is, or will be, or could be.
Right. The city relies on private developers to install the local street system in the community, and in some cases the collector street system. So in this case, what we had was a development that you see is not, you know, a rectangle or a square. It's, you know, kind of a oddly shaped with some intermediate properties. So to be able to make the local street connections, given what we had, that's what was laid out back in '06.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Guest Councilor Wren.
I just wanted to make the comment that when you were talking about just compensation, the developers offered the Johnsons about $15,000 apparently. You can't buy a good car for that. This is a piece of property. This is their life. I was very touched by what he had to say. And you don't have to be emotional about it, but it's still, you know, they've got a lot of an investment in their home and that property. Is there any way that the city has mediation services to apply to this situation? I mean, an eminent domain thing is they're going to fight it, you know that, and it's going to cost the city a lot of money, a lot more money than they're offering to pay the Johnsons. Is that what the city wants to do, is to pay?
Go ahead.
Pay a lot more money?
If council were to authorize the city to acquire the property, what we would do is reach out to the property owner and try to find an amicable solution. However, any compensation we were to pay to the property owner would have to be approved by the developer, so we couldn't just open the checkbook. We would try to find something that works for them. Now, keep in mind that this is a small swath of gravel road that we're replacing with a city street.
Seems like that it just seems like that it's getting so detailed, and the discussion of the street being straight or being a little crooked, or it's all beside the point. It's the emotional value that the owners and the developers have with their own properties. And any mediation that could come up from any source would be better than eminent domain, which is so harsh.
Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mayor Pro Tem. Clean title. For theoretical conversation's sake, say we left the easement there and put the road in. What would that actually do? Could they still drive down the dirt road, go over the curbs and sidewalks, and then back over the other side? Or what is the actual,
well,
besides code, what is the harm of just leaving the easement there, and then they would just build across it, and the Johnsons would get zero, correct? And they would access somehow off of that new street that goes through.
I think practically speaking, and Peter might be the better one to answer this question, but practically speaking, if we were going to have a cross driveway over a city street, I think we would probably improve it so it was more of an intersection look than it would just be a curb that he's got to jump whenever he wants to get onto the transportation system.
But we would have to leave it as an access way somehow based on the easement
Right.
language.
But the issue with that is that it doesn't simply connect him to the street and goes off to Wallace following the Hope Avenue extension. He would cross over the Hope Avenue extension onto the Fry property to the north, continue down the gravel driveway to another entrance where his entrance is right now, which is, I think, 50 feet, 30 feet down from where the Hope Avenue is going to be. In my mind, the code doesn't allow us to accept it, and that is a hyper sensitive interpretation of the code, and because of the nature of this development, the city attorney's office, me specifically, I wasn't willing to say, oh, this is okay, it's just an easement. He's got to give us clean title, and clean title means removing these property interests. So to the assertions that staff or the city attorney's office is playing favorites here, I think Mr. Fry might feel differently because we're really putting him through his paces to get this easement off of the title.
And the easement that we're actually looking at acquiring in this process tonight, which is really the only thing we're supposed to be talking about tonight, is whether or not the developers made a good faith effort to acquire said piece, is only to take the little piece in the circle. The rest of the access easement will remain?
That's correct.
Councilor Bennett, then guest Councilor Bauer.
I apologize. You might have to do it more slowly for me on this.
Well, I'm pretty sure, too, that that's the case.
I'm interested in what you said about this easement and the level of care that's being taken by your office and appreciated by, I think, the council. But do we really, in fact, as just a matter of the future of the city and the protecting the rights of the community and all the other stuff we've heard about tonight, do we actually have to have that easement?
I believe we do, because the code says they must provide us clear title, and clear title means free of encumbrances, and this is an encumbrance.
Can we waive that as a city council? Can we overrule
You would need to
it?
amend the code.
Okay. Okay. Would that be, what's the timeline on that?
60 days, 90 days.
Okay. When we figure out the price, we got to take a look at the cost per day, maybe.
And perhaps Public Works could, or the developer could speak to that, but I would be concerned from my legal engineering standpoint of allowing a private access across the city street.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, because I kind of perked up, sorry.
Well, you were
this one may be benign because it is simply an access easement, and if the easement were to remain, we would do driveways on both sides, and you could cross it on both sides and call it good. But to amend a code, there's a reason for that code, and we could find ourselves acquiring or accepting rights of way and plats that might have all kinds of encumbrances, and then we would have a lot of other issues to face. So I would proceed with great caution.
You make a good argument then not to change the code, but I didn't hear in your argument a reason not to just move ahead without messing with this easement. I want to understand better why, just because it's in the code. I mean, is this one of these loops we're caught in?
Right, that's the legal issue. The practical issue of this one is that we would simply provide driveways on both sides. I mean, it's a public street.
Yeah.
So visitors to the Johnson property, the Johnson family, I would imagine would simply use the public street, and they would be welcome to use the public street because that's what it's there for. So from the factual nature of this case, it's really a code issue that we're addressing. But I would not recommend, and I would provide you with a lot of issues related to amending the code to allow us to accept or allow developers to dedicate rights of way that are encumbered by other issues, because that really opens a Pandora's box of problems.
Okay. Well, I'm just concerned that we've caused this little eruption. We're actually revisiting something 10 years old. We're talking about apparently 50 years of third bridge activity, the future of 10 years of bridge activity and all that, tied up over this very small easement problem. And that, for me, just as a layman, there's something that defies common sense here. That makes me, and I understand it's the law. I mean, I do, I get it, but it just defies kind of the common sense that would say, let's get this done and move on ahead, because the complexities ahead over Hope Drive and the work that's going to go on over Hope Drive is going to clear all this stuff up if that third bridge is ever built. So you see what I'm saying? That this really is a temporary problem if in fact that third bridge is ever built. It sounds like. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yes, Councilor Bauer.
Most of what I was concerned about came through this discussion. However, just a couple of quick questions for City Attorney. Going back to Mr. Shipman's testimony, the Frys own the entire piece of property. So this is not about the Johnsons owning a piece of this property. It's just the easement that they own, or that they own as a part of the title.
Correct.
For
if
the
you're familiar
property
with the
that is
bundle of
owned.
sticks analogy, they own one of those sticks.
Okay. So we keep talking about this as if the Frys are a property owner, but they're just an easement owner. I'm just getting a clarification to make sure.
Johnson?
Or, excuse me, the Johnsons are an easement owner, not a property owner for this piece of property.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilor Nate?
Just to clarify that a little more, and that easement is for access.
Right.
Which this road, if we took and just kind of split the access easement to the east, that would give them access to their property. Anyone accessing that property would use the new street system unless they wanted to go boony womping over the far side. So in that respect, it actually, in my opinion, is an improvement over the current easement. So, and that's where you get into that whole thing on what's the value. It's better. It's a better access than what the easement currently grants, and that's what our issue is on good faith efforts to acquire that tonight. So,
Councilor Lewis?
That raises a question, and maybe Dan, you can help. And I'm trying to remember from the lawyer school days, but there's this theory
Me too.
about merging values, and if you have a lower value like an easement and you gain fee title, then that lower value is merged or extinguished. I'm trying to see if that theory works here. If the Frys were to pave this property that they owned, in essence pave over the easement, then the easement would be improved by it now being a street. And would that improvement therefore merge the easement and have it theoretically go away?
if it moves right up to the property line.
Or two, if the easement has in fact been covered up by a public street, has the easement been abandoned and been replaced by a public street?
The answer to those questions would be no and no. Merger is a legal doctrine when you acquire an easement. Say the Johnsons formerly have an easement over the property. If they were to acquire that property, the easement would merge with their title and the easement would go away. So that's the concept of merger. Simply because the burden property improves the easement by paving it doesn't cause the person who owns the easement to abandon it. Two different concepts. That's probably all I can say about that.
It's a try.
Other questions? Okay, I have one more for you, the city attorney there. We heard testimony on 0610 and 0606 and
that they hadn't been properly followed, which I think, and, you know, there was an asking for holding the public hearing open and delaying the thing. In your introduction, in your staff report, you basically said we're not supposed to be considering any of that. Is that correct? Am I accurate in that?
That's correct.
And the reason is?
Well, because what we're talking about here is just the acquisition of this property interest. The folks who testified, Mr. Easterly testified that in that UGA preliminary declaration, that permit, this is a requirement. He acknowledged that's a requirement. Once it's a requirement for the developer to build, it triggers this opportunity to come to the city to acquire it through eminent domain. And the code says before the developer can do that, it's got to provide good faith efforts that he tried to acquire it on his own. In staff's opinion, they've done that. So at this point, it's now council's decision on whether, if you decide he's made good faith efforts, then it's council's decision on whether you want to authorize the city to do it. If you don't authorize the city to acquire it, either through arm's length transaction or eminent domain, you've got a situation where the developer is out of compliance with their conditions of approval. You've got a public street that can never be conveyed to the city with clear title. According to the code, guidelines or laws notwithstanding, the code says got to have clear title before we can accept it. So you've got a street that could essentially be a private street. The budding property owner, the Johnsons, could make up a litany of arguments about how this private street interferes with their access rights, and you've heard the testimony about that it's got to have ADA compatibility and he's got to be able to access it. Regardless of whether the property is acquired or not, that's got to happen, and they've got to provide them reasonable access to their property through their easement. But it's fairly clear cut in my mind. As far as the request to keep the record open or continue the hearing, you are not required to do that. The applicant, who's going to have an opportunity for rebuttal here in a minute, can speak to the timelines and whether that would hurt their process, but you're not required to keep the record open or continue the hearing if you don't desire to do that.
Other questions? Okay, we've got applicant's opportunity to rebuttal, 7 minutes. Mr. Shipman?
Thank you. Guest Mayor McCoy. This really is fairly simple, and it's turned into something really complex, unfortunately. Councilor Benjamin, I owe you a correction. You asked with respect to, were there additional things that the developer would do for the property owner? And I said no, but I've been corrected. And the developer will put in underground power to the Johnson's property, no matter if we have to condemn or we don't condemn. The developer's committed to putting in that underground power to the Johnson's property through his multifamily project. He's agreeing to do that, okay? Second, there's no reason to postpone, no reason to keep any record open. There's no reason to delay. And my reason for that is this, is that one, the code doesn't allow it. Well, I guess if you wanted to, in your power, you could, but there's no reason to. Second, the other important factor is that our occupancy of the apartments that are already underway, already being constructed right now, our occupancy is dependent on Hope Avenue Northwest being built and being approved and accepted by the city. If we don't get that built, approved, and accepted by the city, then we don't get occupancy permits. And that's the catch-22 for us. So timing is very important for us at this point. A question was raised with respect to the offers. And if you look at your packets, if you take a look at your council packets, and look at effectively the offers from the developer in this case were made to the Johnsons after conversations that Mr. Fry had with Mr. Johnson. So Mr. Fry and Mr. Johnson would have a conversation, and then the developer would come in with an offer. And then the developer said, I want to go see an attorney. And the property owner said, I want to go see an attorney. And the developer said, I'm not going to pay for that. A year passes. They meet again. Their talk as neighbors talk. Mr. Johnson says, I want this, 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 and this, and this. Mr. Fry comes back with a letter on August 27th of 2015 and lays out exactly what Mr. Johnson requested. We submit that to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They go to an attorney, and their attorney says, not enough. Their attorney comes back in a subsequent letter and says, hey, chain link fencing isn't good enough. We want vinyl fencing. And not only do we want vinyl fencing, but you need to put in a brand new sewer connection for us. And not only do you need to put in a brand new sewer connection for us, you need to pay us $45,000 in severance fees. And it just doesn't stop. It keeps going and going and going, okay? And so at some point, you got to say, we've done enough. We've done enough with respect to cross the good faith threshold. Finally, the comment's been made, well, what's the fair market value of this property? How do you value one of those bundles of sticks with respect to the entire bundle? How do you do that from a fair market perspective? Well, we went out and had an appraisal done, okay? We had an appraiser go out there, and an MAI appraiser go out and appraise the property. And he came back and he said, I'm not going to value just the easement. I'm not just going to value that one little stick, Mr. Shipman, that you say that you want me to value. I'm going to value the whole bundle for that 910 square feet, okay? I'm going to come up with a dollar figure of roughly $5 a square foot, okay? So the fair market value that our appraiser has come back to us with has said for the if we were to sell this to someone would be $4,685, okay? So and that's in my mind that's kind of on the high side. That's essentially all of the bundles of sticks. But what we're talking about is just one stick, and that's the easement. I think staff got it right. I think that Dan has done a good job with respect to explaining not only the law to you, but the rationale for why we need to go through this. The code requires it. I wish, Councilor Bennett, I had a magic wand and I could go to Peter and I could go to Dan and say, hey, kind of in this sense, could you just waive it and allow us to just allow the easement there? And I wish they would say yes, but the code says differently, and they're saying differently. So that's why we're here. We're not here for any other reason. We've done our good faith effort. We've done our due diligence in this, and I would request that you move staff recommendation. Thank you very much.
Okay, close the hearing. Okay, we'll close the hearing. Councilor Lewis, do you have a motion?
I do. I move that council adopt resolution 2016-10 and find that the developer has made good faith efforts to acquire the necessary property interests and authorize the city attorney to proceed with acquisition of the property interests, including the use of eminent domain if necessary.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Lewis has moved the staff recommendation, and Councilor Nanke has seconded it. Any discussion? Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, this is not easy for me in some ways, but it got easier as the evening went on. This is property that abuts the Johnson property. It is not the Johnson property. They may have owned it or other property around here at one time, but they have chosen to sell it. And if it's been developed, it's been developed. This is about a requirement, whether it's silly or not, to take what is now a dirt easement and turn it into a usable city street. To unfairly withhold that is not fair. When it comes to Hope Avenue, this is a part of Hope Avenue that needs to be done today to service the part of the public that's living there today and going to be living there as soon as the apartments are finished. My crystal ball gets real cloudy after that. What will happen with Hope Avenue will depend on what happens. I keep reminded of the John Lennon song, reality is what happens while you're busy making other plans. I think the city has done its job and done it as well as it can, and I encourage the council to vote for the motion.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Eminent domain is always a tough one. In this case, we're not taking someone's property. What one would say is we could potentially be taking away access to one's property, which is what the easement is for. But what will in fact happen is the property adjacent to this will have improved access to their property. So in that respect, I don't see that we're really taking anything from them. They're getting more based on the final design of this. That being said, you know, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but even with that, and I'm sure staff would have it, or the developer as well, that access from Hope Avenue to the Johnson's property will be paved as well. It's not going to be a dirt strip coming off of a city street. But all we are to be focused on tonight is that little oval. So the access overall will be safer because of that little oval versus the alignment out on Wallace Road as well. So in that respect, I see that the developer has made a good faith effort, especially looking at the potential prices and the offers they've made, which are above and beyond a standard appraisal, and even cash on top of that, with some other utility benefits to the property owner as well. I wish my power line was buried. I can see about 40 of them right as I look out my driveway. It's a beautiful sight. So with that, I'll support the motion.
Okay. You know, I agree with Councilor Nanki. These are always tough. Every time I see these where we're acting as judge and jury on these property issues, I sort of cringe because they're never easy. And especially never easy when it's the one side is it's been a home for 50 plus 60 years, whatever that number was, a long time. It's their home. That makes it personal. That makes it very difficult to try to be just, you know, dealing with the facts and reaching a real cold decision. But on the other hand, I think the difference here for me, and every time I hear eminent domain, I sort of go, oh, geez, here we go. That makes me worried, too. I'm worried about people's property and their right to do what they want with their property. In this case, it's not their property. It's an access issue on an easement. We're not taking property from somebody. I have a feeling that we had two strong personalities that butted heads, didn't get along, and maybe the negotiations didn't do well, going either way, didn't like the approach. I'm not sure what happened there, but I sort of get the angst that there's some bad feelings involved here, and again, it's their home, and I understand that. But in this case, when it's 900 and some square feet in the middle of a proposed intersection on a needed public street on property that isn't their property, it's really the developer's property, and we've got to leave, and that's what's holding this up. I'm going to support this too, because I think in the long run it's better for the people in West Salem and certainly in that neighborhood to do so. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. We have a roll call vote, or we just a voice vote? We've got a motion by Councilor Lewis, seconded by Councilor Nantke, to approve the staff recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Hearing's closed. Want to take a break here? Sure. Let's take a break before we get to the next hearing. About 5 minutes here. 4C, approval of formation of the Trelstad Reimbursement District. City Recorder, please announce the hearing.
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding the formation of Trelstad Reimbursement District. The criteria applicable to this application are set forth in Salem Revised Code Section 200.315B. The hearing will be conducted with a staff presentation first, followed by the applicant, neighborhood association, and other interested persons, and applicant's rebuttal.
Thank you. Peter, are you, who is, oh, there we are. Thank you. Introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair McCoy and councilors and guest councilors. My name is Glenn Davis, and I'm the Chief Development Engineer in the Public Works Department. We're here to discuss the formation of the Trelstad Reimbursement District. Since our last reimbursement district was about a year ago, I'll begin my presentation with a refresher course about reimbursement districts. But when a development is proposed in an area that lacks critical infrastructure, the first developer in that area has to pay the upfront costs for a new public improvement. Reimbursement districts require future developers to pay their fair share through district fees. This process allows everyone to pay their fair share, both the initial developer who builds the improvements and the future latecomers who benefit from them. Next, I'd like to define a few key terms that are common to every reimbursement district. First relates to eligibility of funding from Systems Development Charges, or SDCs. One key component of SDC eligibility relates to the eligible projects list. To be eligible for SDCs, the improvement has to be included in a specific list of eligible projects. For SDCs, not all streets are on that list, and most street projects that are on the list are less than 100% eligible. So for tonight's district, the project is listed as improvements to Trelstad Avenue between I-5 and Kubler, and the project is listed as 19% eligible.
I'm looking at that.
SDC eligibility is based on whether a project adds capacity to the existing system. So to illustrate that, I'm going to use an example here on the screen of a hypothetical two-lane road that is in need of additional capacity. Now I've shown some brand new pavement where the additional eastbound lane was added to this hypothetical street. So this new lane could be as much as 100% SDC eligible because its sole purpose is to add capacity. Now I'll go back to the two-lane road again and look at another type of capacity improvement project. So now here on the screen we see a project to rebuild and widen this old two-lane road that was in need of repair. The hypothetical project adds a center turn lane to the two-lane road, which adds about 20% additional capacity. Therefore, this project would generally be 20% SDC eligible. So next, I will explain the term developer's share. Not all of the developer's expenses are reimbursable because the developer has a fair share to contribute. Therefore, in calculating reimbursable costs, there is a developer's share that is subtracted from each project. Next, every reimbursement district establishes a district boundary. Properties are located in this boundary because they all receive benefit from the improvements that were constructed by the developer. These properties are not subject to a lien or an assessment that is recorded against the property. They are simply required to pay a district fee that is collected at the time the property develops. If they never develop, then no district fees are due. The last element of my introduction is an overview of the district formation process. So here's a schematic diagram showing the basic steps in the formation of a reimbursement district. The process starts with a proposed development project. Next, there's some infrastructure that is lacking and required to serve the development and also provides a benefit to neighboring properties. Next, the district is formed, and we are at that step in the process right now. Here you see two process steps circled. After the district is formed, the developer constructs the required improvements. I will point out that all prior reimbursement districts have been formed after the improvements were completed. This Trelstad district is the first time where the district is formed before the improvements have been built. So once the district is established, then properties within that district pay the reimbursement district fee when those properties develop. After construction, final costs are certified by the city, and at this point, all of the district fee amounts and reimbursable cost totals are adjusted to reflect actual costs, and a revised resolution is presented to council. Lastly, the original developer is reimbursed up to the total amount of eligible costs. Okay, so now to transition to the details of the Trelstad district. On the screen is a vicinity map of the Oregon State Police facility. The facility is located north of Kubler Boulevard between Interstate 5 and the Union Pacific Railroad. Here the Oregon State Police facility is shown in blue, and that project was required to construct street improvements adjacent to the property as shown in red on the screen. I will zoom in a little closer to explain those improvements in more detail. So here's an aerial view of the current 36th Trelstad intersection just north of Kubler Boulevard. The entire intersection had to be rebuilt to improve safety and add lanes. So here I've drawn in the proposed lane configuration. This alignment reconfigures the intersection by adding lanes and making the through movement safer and more efficient. The total estimated cost is around $620,000. Approximately $120,000 is SDC eligible, so the remainder of $500,000, give or take, is eligible for reimbursement through district fees. So next I'll discuss the district boundary. The district has a few barriers that influence our recommendation for a district boundary. First, we have I-5 on the west. I'll point out that there is an undercrossing of I-5 at Marietta, so areas west of I-5 can potentially benefit as well. Nonetheless, it is a noticeable landmark. The next boundary is the Union Pacific Railroad to the east. The only crossings of this railroad in this area is I-5 and Kubler. Lastly, we have Kubler as an obvious boundary on the south. So all these barriers lend to a district boundary as shown on the screen. A few small properties are removed because they're in city or state ownership and are not developable. I'll note also that each of the property owners within the district boundary received notice at least 10 days prior to the hearing and will have an opportunity to speak. Next, I'll move on to the apportionment of costs. The district fee is based on average daily vehicle trips because that is the same measurement used for charging transportation SDCs. I'll point out that TSDCs are currently around $204 a trip. The Oregon State Police facility generates 1,379 trips per day, so they have already paid approximately $280,000 in SDCs. So next we need to predict the total number of trips to be generated from developments within the district boundary, and we've estimated that total to be 9,352, and that's based on potential development opportunities in the district based on current zoning. So now I'm illustrating those values on the screen kind of as a graphical representation of the land area. So the police facility is about 10% of the district's land area and about 15% of the total trip projection. So if the trip estimate is too high, the developer gets fully reimbursed sooner than 20 years. If the trip estimate is too low, then the developer never gets fully reimbursed. So now given $500,000 in estimated costs and 9,352 estimated trips, the recommended district fee is $53.76 per trip. I'll note also that this value is about 1/4 of the TSDC, as you'll see the $204 value above. So now remember that the developer has to pay their fair share of the improvements, which is around $74,000. So subtracting the developer's share from the unreimbursed cost, the maximum total reimbursement cost is capped at approximately $430,000. So to summarize, the district fee is $53.76 per trip. The fee is only due when someone in the district develops and generates vehicle trips. The total construction costs of around $620,000 are reimbursed partly from TSDCs, and the developer's share portion is not reimbursable, so the remaining unreimbursed total of $428,000 is the maximum allowable reimbursement from district fees. And I'll close by reminding us of the next steps. So we're here now in the district formation step. The next steps include construction of the improvements by the developer, certification of costs by the city. The city will immediately start collecting district fees from new development projects in the district boundary. After final costs are established, an amended district fee amount will be presented to council through a separate resolution. And at that point, the developer will be reimbursed for eligible costs. In closing, the staff recommends approval of the reimbursement district formation. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Councilor Bauer? We did it last time, after the staff report.
Very simple question. Just double checking on the trip number for the OSP, was that for over a 20-year period? It was 1,379?
1,379 is the trips for the facility that they're constructing right now. That is the
Over a
trips.
20-year period?
That is the trips immediately when it's upon
Okay,
opening.
immediate. And so why did you, in the other one, factor them over 20 years? I can't remember which slide that was.
Sorry. Because the reimbursement district lasts 20 years, so as the development happens as little pieces of development happen over that entire boundary over 20 years, ultimately, eventually, that $9,000 trip value would be reached, because developments would happen one at a time over the course of 20 years.
Okay, so first in is the best deal as for the Oregon State Police?
Well, they'll all pay the same, $53.76 per trip. They'd all have the same fair share payment.
Okay.
Okay, you said
I think
they
I'm
all
getting
pay first.
Okay, no other questions? We'll bring up the applicant. Good evening. So give your name, your address, who you're representing, and you've got 15 minutes.
Good evening, Council. My name is Keith Wissenut. I'm a principal engineer with Project Delivery Group. Our firm's been engaged by the applicant to provide owner's representation and project management services. And we've worked with city staff to provide information related to the district and have full support of their recommendation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those now or later. That's all I really have to say.
Any questions? No? Thank you. Neighborhood Association. Do we have a Neighborhood Association representative here to speak to this?
No, on inside.
No? Okay, we'll go to members of the public. Steve Ward. Good evening.
Good
State
evening.
your name, who you represent. And
Thank you very much.
Got 3 minutes.
My name is Steve Ward. I'm a principal of West Tech Engineering. First thing I want to tell you, I have multiple conflict of interest here. My family owned the property that OSP currently resides at. I did all the engineering for OSP, including this intersection. My family currently owns the 10.4 acres north of OSP, and our firm represents Jordan Sparks, who has open dental property off of Marietta. I haven't really been involved in this reimbursement district until recently when we got the notification. You think the last application was complicated? This is much more complicated than you can ever believe, okay? I really have 3 issues. One is the SDCs and the reimbursement, the 19%. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Davis. I have a big issue with the engineer's estimate that was submitted with the application. And then I have a really big issue with fair allocation in the future. You're right, first in really benefits, and I can explain that in a minute here. You know, when we have sewer and water projects, it's real simple. You got an 8-inch water line, you got a 24-inch water line, the oversizing is real simple. On streets, the city has always used the 19% in this case to pay for the oversizing. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Davis. This street in itself, we're talking about intersection improvements. All the improvements OSP is doing create capacity. They're all creating capacity. So I disagree that 19% is towards capacity. OSP should get 100% of their SDCs back. They should get 100% of their $280,000 back, because all they're doing is creating capacity. And that makes a huge difference in the math. And then when you look at the rest of the math, the engineer's estimate I have a real problem with. My original estimate for this work, including Trelstad Court, was $245,000. The new estimate's $275,000 just for construction. There's a line item in there for electrical and lighting modifications at the intersection. It's not even on our approved drawings, okay? So I don't know where that came from. I'm having a problem having SDCs pay for the relocation of utilities. The engineering assigned to this is $64,000. Our fee was $73,000 for the whole project. And so I have a major problem approving this, collecting SDCs, when this estimate is not reality. And finally, the property to the north, the 10.4 acres, has received SDC approval. There's been no conditions of any improvements for that. Now they're talking about $50, which is not a big deal. That's not the point. But what happens is the next application that comes in, now we're going to have 1,370 less trips. So next time it's 7937, and the next time it's 6594, and then it's 5,000 trips. So you keep getting less and less trips, and so you're going to get an exponential. And OSP, and I'm in for site plan review, I get off scot-free. OSP is not going to contribute. If you look at the Litchfield development, they literally have $6 million in construction alone. They'll come in and do the same thing. So the people who come in later are going to be severely impacted by this. I really want you to take a look at this and have staff take a look at this in more detail. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Bennett.
I just wanted to understand, again, Mr. Ward, the $54 begins to grow. I wanted to follow that.
So what happens is, we start out with 9,352 trips, right?
Yeah.
But OSP has 1,379 trips.
So they have banked those.
So they banked those, and those trips are now gone. Let's assume somebody else comes in, and they also have 1,379 trips, and let's assume that they're going to spend $500,000 and set up a reimbursement district. But now, instead of dividing by 9,352, we divide by 7973. The next time it's 6,500 because you start knocking trips off. For example, my development has 350 trips. When I come in, I'll pay the $53, but those trips are gone. I won't pay those again. And I don't pay for any other improvements down the road.
So the $54 per trip is not a constant.
It's not a constant. And by my math, it goes to $463 a trip if you assume that every 1,379 trips gets $500,000 back. Okay. If you make that assumption, that number goes to $463 per trip for the last guy in. So basically, you're going to stop all development. And what I'm really trying to tell you is this SDC thing, this whole setup is really flawed. I mean, this is really complicated, and I know that's a lot for me to give you in 3 minutes, but it's really, 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 really complicated.
Thank you.
But, okay?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Other questions? Councilor Nanke.
Thanks for coming down. And your business is up the street as well on this.
Yep.
Because we define this here. Do you know what we have for developable properties?
Oh, there's a lot of developable property.
we talk about Marietta all the time, and if there's a benefit, you know, I've worked there for 10 odd years as well, and that's a ton of truck traffic, and the entire industrial area comes out through that as far as benefits to folks. So.
Right. Well, my opinion is you should give the developers $280,000 back and not even form the reimbursement district. That's my opinion.
Would you be willing to essentially write up your testimony and
absolutely
submit what you think's wrong with this?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Other questions? Okay, so I want to make sure I understood, you know, as you started stacking them up and it got more expensive, are you saying basically there might in the future be another reimbursement district that got laid over the old reimbursement district?
Absolutely, 100% guarantee you that's what's going to happen. The Litchfield property has $6 million worth of infrastructure that they're going to have to do. They're going to form a district because they now know they can, of course. And by the way, these are conditions of approval. The Litchfield property had a condition of approval for their zone change, just like OSP had a condition of their approval for their work because of the traffic impact they created. And the right turn lanes that they are building, I think, are SDC eligible. I think they should get all that money back, okay? But what happens is, you know, their make it 1,400 trips. Their 1,400 trips are now gone, so you don't have 9,400. You got 8,000
for a future
the next district.
The next district.
And if you and my simple math, if I just assumed every district for every 1,379 trips was a $500,000 district, by the time I get down to the end, I'm paying $463 a trip extra over and above the $200 a trip that you have. It is not right. It's absolutely not right. And that only generates, by the way, $3.5 million. Because after seven developments with 1,379 trips, if you assume 500,000, that gets you to the 463. If you believe it's going to be closer to $10 million, that number is going to be $2,000 a trip.
So I'll ask you this question. Can you point to another example of this where they got overlaid and this occurred in the city?
No, this is the first time ever that I know of. But I know that there's other examples where the city's just given the developer their SDCs and not formed a reimbursement district, which is really appropriate in this case.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Thanks for waiting and coming down. There is no other public testimony, so the applicant has time for rebuttal. Oh, okay. It's just, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The rookie again is out of control here.
Sorry.
I'm talking about this rookie, not that rookie.
No, this is the rookie. Is there a, okay, so we'll be able to ask questions of...
That's what we're going to do right now.
Great.
We'll have questions of staff. Yeah. Councilor Bennett.
Thank you.
Guest Councilor Bauer, Councilor Nanke.
So can you go back to your slide, your $54 slide? I want to have you kind of explain, if you can, kind of what the, you know what I'm, 5376, I'm sorry. Is that a constant? I mean, Mr. Ward is describing a very different scenario in terms of how that number begins to escalate as the number of trips shrink. And is that just for the first, is that just for OSP? That 5376, and it'll go up for the next guy and the, you see what?
For this reimbursement district, that's all anyone would ever pay is $53.76 per trip for this improvement.
So when Mr. Ward develops his property and has 1,300 trips coming off of his piece of property there, he will only pay $53.76 per trip.
Yes.
And the next guy brings in 500, he'll only pay $53.76.
Yes.
Well,
But can he form a reimbursement?
Can he form another reimbursement? I mean, can you begin stacking reimbursement districts then? Is that what Mr. Ward's describing?
That's what he's presuming, and let me just briefly explain a couple things. One of them is that, for example, one of those developments might improve the rest of Trelstad to the west from this intersection. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, missed it, wrong way. They might improve Trelstad to the west, I apologize, which is coming from here all the way to the west. This improvement might be done by another developer, for example. That would be a frontage improvement that would be done by the developer, and they would be generally given SDCs for what's called oversizing, which is about 19%. And so they would, their share would be the entire cost. There it goes. Their share would be the entire cost of that minus SDCs, so there would be no district. So that's an example of one that would have no district. They might do an improvement on Kubler to add a lane on Kubler. I keep on losing my cursor, I apologize. The Kubler improvement would be 100% SDC eligible because it would be all capacity. So he's presuming that each one would have a district that's not SDC eligible. So there's some presumptions that may not happen.
But when you look at your slide that showed formation of districts, you had the kind of buttons circled in red, and
yeah.
I could, it looked like when I look at how that flow chart works, I could come back to the city council saying, I've got a proposed development, I've got some required infrastructure, I'm ready to form my reimbursement district and proceed. Is that possible? I mean, this is not some static district. This is something that can change using this description, right? Or am I?
A different improvement could have a different district boundary and have some additional monies that would be either fully SDC reimbursable or partially. I mean, a future district could come. That is
inside
possible.
This district. These are not some sort of static lines.
The last one was for a Kubler improvement on it was an eastbound lane on Kubler, and it wasn't done entirely on the south side of Kubler. And so, yes, the improvements have different district boundaries.
Yeah.
But the Trelstad district, is it static or
Yeah,
is
Glenn,
it
if you would bring up the
flexible?
district, I know what you're asking, Counselor. I want Glenn to bring up the district boundary map. So the district for this, the Trelstad Reimbursement District,
right,
if adopted by council, would be this district right here. What you're asking is if another improvement could come in.
Could you have another blue district inside it?
And it could be the exact, which is what Mr. Ward is presuming, that we would use, or, I mean, he could propose the same district, he could propose a different district. This is driven by the applicant. This isn't driven by staff.
Right.
Staff approves what they propose, or it could be a different district. I mean, the boundaries could overlap, and they absolutely could overlap, or it could be the same district. But this district does not change.
But this district benefits then first guy in.
Well,
because he got to say 9,300 trips, right?
He is bearing the full cost of the improvement first. So he is, so if nothing else develops out there, if we go through another downturn and nothing else develops, and 20 years elapse, then he gets nothing except for his TSDC reimbursement. So he is quote unquote benefited because he can establish a reimbursement district, but he can only establish a reimbursement district because he is fronting the amount of money of the project. So this is nothing more than a latecomer fee, and these have come to council before. Yeah. This is a latecomer fee so that the others, you know, if it hadn't been Oregon State Police, if it had been Mr. Ward's property that had come in first to the north, Mr. Ward would have had to put in the improvement. He could have requested that district, but he would still be out the initial money for the improvement.
Thank you.
I guess Councilor Bauer?
Just to double check that the capacity of trips for the district is fixed. 9,352 plus 1,379.
Effectively, yes. What's fixed is that the fee per trip is fixed, and the maximum that can be reimbursed is fixed. And those two divided by each other is that number of trips. So in effect, yes.
So if a development occurred inside the red boundary in the future that was proposing that would have 3 times the number of trips, 27,000 trips, is that at $53.76?
Only till they got to 9,352, and then the rest of them would be paid off. It would be done. So there would be nothing
would
left.
they have to form another district in order to handle that number of trips?
No, because they would have. The goal is to pay back the improvement. So they would have fully funded the reimbursement of the improvement, and that way it's just ended. It's over.
Okay, so it's about a finite amount of money being paid off in a finite amount of time.
Yes.
So,
in an ever-expanding universe, that's the
exactly.
Councilor Nanke.
Yeah, weirdnesses abound. It is much more complicated than
it's quantum.
Because essentially, then, if there's some dude put in a 27,000 trip, all the other property owners are off the hook.
Yeah.
But you still have the potential for an overlap, which then this guy's trips are going to pay for part into the Trelstad district and whatever other district may show up if the boundaries are different or overlapping as well. Yeah, Mr. Ward does a lot of work for us, and it'd really be interesting to see what options are on that. And the one that kind of sparked me is giving back all of his SDCs and just call it good. What is wrong with that?
Well, it's only eligible to 19%. So we'd have to do the math of whatever. Have we given him the maximum SDC in your math?
19%, yes.
Yeah. So go to your math table. So he is not eligible for. He pays $280,000 in TSDC. You see there.
Right.
But that improvement is only 19% eligible. So he is only eligible for 19% of $280,000.
Because we picked 19%.
We didn't pick it. The analysis showed that the improvements, there's a concept for systems development charges that's called past sins. So all the existing traffic that's on that road today cannot be, you can't use SDCs to make that improvement. So the initial improvement that addresses, the capacity needs of the existing location, we cannot use SDC. It's only the additional improvements that actually create capacity. And in our analysis, when we did the analysis years ago, that's what established that only 19% was eligible. So so we live by those percentages.
Do we know the trips that move through that now?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I take that. I even coming home, because then I don't have to go over the freeway and get locked up in everything else. I can buzz that, go down through the industrial district, hit Madrona, or take Reed up. And I'm sure a lot of people do that. And more of them would do that if this were improved. So I think there will be a lot more than a 19% difference in this road, because it is kind of squirrely right now.
Right, but that's not the way, I completely agree with you, but that's not the way the methodology is laid out and adopted by council.
Well,
So
that's the thing. That's how it was laid out by council.
We can't make up a new methodology for every project. So the methodology is the methodology. The same way that the methodology includes that, we only collect a percentage of what we could collect.
Correct.
So we could collect, our universe of TSDCs is significantly higher.
Oh, yeah.
We've made a choice of only collecting a fraction of that. So therefore, that all impacts, that all impacts what we can pay out. And in this case, what he could collect is, the 19% of the amount. So we don't have a method of giving him $250,000.
And if I may, last piece then, as far as timing, I don't see an asterisk or anything. Is there any kind of a timeline? I think it would be very valuable for people to understand the whole process in general, if we could get a write-up from someone who deals with a lot of property and transportation issues, and have staff respond to those suggestions for alternate realities.
Yeah.
It would actually, I would enjoy
Just understand.
the read myself.
You're asking for a staff analysis of Mr. Ward's proposed changes?
Yeah, if he would submit something for then staff to review that. And
So I would suggest, unless the applicant in the rebuttal or staff feels a need for a more timely decision, then you could close the hearing and keep the record open, or continue the hearing for a period of time to allow Mr. Ward to submit his written testimony and staff to respond to it.
And then the applicant would still
Retain his rights.
have rebuttal after that took place.
Well, oral rebuttal, if you close the hearing, would happen tonight. If you want to allow written rebuttal to whatever arguments Mr. Ward makes, then that's fine. Then the applicant can submit that after Mr. Ward or anyone else has submitted testimony, written testimony.
Would that normally be submittal of testimony if we wanted staff to actually give analysis of that, then written rebuttal?
My suggestion, if you want to do it, would be to allow 7 days for written testimony, and then 7 days on top of that for the applicant's final written argument in response to it. That would also allow 7 days for staff to respond to it as well.
Okay. Councilor Benjamin?
So on the white lines there, that would be figured in this matrix as being 100% improved. And then there's going to be a certain amount of travel through that improvement, and with that formula, it's $50-something a trip. The OSP is on the hook for 19% of that. Am I correct in understanding? No.
That is not correct.
Okay, I hear 19%.
No, 19% is what is TSDC eligible. So
Okay.
OSP is paying, the developer is paying $250,000 in transportation systems development charges.
Right.
This improvement is valued at $620,000.
Right.
But that the SDC eligibility, there it is, it's 19% of $620,000.
Right.
So we can only reimburse from SDCs $118,000. The other $500,000 of the estimated cost has to come from something other, some pocket other than systems development
Well, that's
charges.
just the growth in that area.
So, well, what this proposes is that growth in the area pay for it.
Right, all of it.
If you did not adopt the district, then beyond the $118,000, the other $500,000 would simply come from the OSP developer's pocket. Right. I mean, that's the other option that you, that's the other option that you have is you either do this reimbursement district so that he can collect from others that are benefited,
right,
or he will simply pay that differential.
Okay.
Because all we can pay, reimburse him for from the methodology that exists is the $118,000.
Which is the 19%.
The 19% of the $621,000.
I will clarify, the applicant's engineer did submit some traffic information that said that they are adding approximately just under 10% of additional traffic to this intersection. So of the current traffic today coming up from the west or north, that direction, adding to it from the OSP site, that's just under a 10% increase in total traffic to that intersection. So
Okay,
that was
yeah.
submitted to us by the applicant, just for reference.
Because people coming from that direction.
Okay, I have a question, and again, it pertains to Mr. Ward's testimony. Is there examples currently where we had an initial, whatever these are called, reimbursement zone, and another one got overlaid over it with additional development, and if so, what were the results and the cost as this occurred?
There are none. There are the potential for some, but there are none.
And how many do we have in the city? Do we have a lot? Is it a handful or?
I've been up here probably 10 to 15 times in the last 10 years.
Oh, okay, then I'm wondering why Nanke and Bennett have questions if they've had 20 of those in front of them, huh? What's up with that?
It's a very complicated issue.
Well, we just changed it again. We're doing something new that we haven't done before, even in this one.
I'm just
They
teasing
have
you.
typically been for, I think they've almost all been for water projects, have they not, Glenn? Water and sewer?
They have varied, but mostly water and sewer.
Yeah, mostly water and sewer.
So, yeah, I'm sort of in agreement if this comes to pass that we slow this down a little and get a little more information, because Mr. Ward also was questioning some of the numbers that were in here based on experience or bids or costs that he had that sort of was shooting by me a little too fast to totally catch and grasp.
Right, so the construction costs, Counselor, are estimates today. When this is actually constructed, we have a process for certifying the cost where we actually review the construction line items and accept them and say, okay, we believe that this is what you've spent, and then that would then become the final amount, higher or lower. What Mr. Ward contends is that this project cost is way higher than he had estimated it to be. So you know what Mr. Davis said is once we have those certified costs, we will come back to council with the reworked mathematics of what the actual dollar per trip is. But today, if there are developments in advance, you know, they would pay the $52 per trip, or the $54 per trip.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. No more? Okay.
Now it's rebuttal.
Okay, now, whoops, Councilor Benjamin.
So with this improvement, it's assumed that would be able to support the 9,000 trips in 20, or that's just amount that's calculated that's going to go over the next 20 years. What if it's more?
Yeah, so we would not anticipate doing more improvements at this intersection. But what Mr. Ward has indicated, which we would agree with, is certainly Trelstad would be improved to something more than a 2-lane road. At a minimum, it would be a 3-lane, what, Mr. Davis has shown originally, maybe wider.
Right.
And there may be improvements to Kubler Boulevard that support, the development of this area.
So one other question, what's the capacity of this improvement? So what if it turns out not to be 9,000 in the next 20 years? Is that able to support 20,000?
If we had, we're making some assumptions based on current zoning, but you could have a situation, what Mr. Bauer said, that, hey, something bigger comes that generates a lot more traffic, then we'd have to look at what this intersection could carry, and there could be other improvements, including doing overpasses, to get traffic in and out of this area.
And that would come into another district?
That would be a pretty significant district.
Okay. Well,
yes.
Well, I mean, it'd be another overlay, maybe not, maybe yes.
If they took the entire development, if somebody came in and did the entire area, then they would just have to do it.
Well, like a 5-story apartment complex with 300 units.
But if they could convince staff and then council that the improvement that they were doing benefited other vacant areas,
gotcha,
then they would come before council, as we're doing tonight, and make a request for this new district. So council ultimately has the decision-making authority as to whether to accept the districts or not.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Nankin.
Thanks. One last piece. Similar to McGilchrist?
Well, McGilchrist is an urban renewal area.
It is now, because of the problem with the initial outlay.
In McGilchrist, and this is where we're entering the Wayback Machine here. The attempt, the initial discussion for McGilchrist was that we would attempt to create a local improvement district. So a local improvement district is different because there the council would decide to lien all of the properties, all of the existing properties. So everyone would have paid whether they were developed or not developed. In reimbursement districts, only if you develop do you pay. So if Mr. Ward chose not to develop his property for 20 years, he would not owe a dime.
Okay. And this is outside of the urban renewal area by how much?
Oh, it's on the other side of I-5 by a little ways, because I think some of the properties closer to I-5 are not in the district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Hearing none, we will now have the rebuttal from the applicant. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Let me start by borrowing some words from Mr. Shipman in the last public hearing. This is something that is reasonably straightforward and has become fairly complicated. I also want to say that I do agree with Mr. Ward, and I tried very hard in my discussions with city staff to attempt to get the applicants' SDCs reimbursed 100%. I failed. I encourage Mr. Ward to continue to try. I would really appreciate his success, and I think every district owner would too. Now, on to a couple of other items, though, that were brought up and discussed. This idea that the first in is greatly benefited. The first in pays the full freight. Also, the first in gets no time value of the money that they've invested, and they wait 20 years to be reimbursed. So if you assume a 3% compounded interest and they get their final payment in 20 years, that's going to be quite a reduction in their reimbursement amount. And I think that it's you have to look at the big picture whenever you think about this first in is really benefited. I think there's benefits to being first in, but there's also some downsides. The comment about the costs and the discussion that council had regarding those issues, I think it's important to remember this is an estimate in order to put the district in place and begin collecting the reimbursement of these improvements. Whenever the cost is finalized, staff will certify this, council will get to see the final number. I think it's also important to remember if you're a business owner or a landowner in that area, would you rather do your financial planning with an estimate that's a little bit inflated and get good news when the costs are certified? Or we can come in with a rock bottom estimate and say, oh, guess what, bad news, guys, it's twice that much. And you know, this was an effort to try and as more and more risk is removed from the project, then the number gets smaller and smaller, and the members of the reimbursement district will get better news whenever it's finalized. We can do it any way that the council would prefer. I think the last comment I want to make is this idea of the stacking districts. While there is potential, it's very much like the comment of the third bridge in the last public hearing. Yeah, the third bridge may happen, but are you going to stop today and what may happen today, which is reality, waiting for and trying to deal with these stacking districts? It's an issue that the development community needs to grapple with more, I believe, than the council. This reimbursement district idea is a tool for development to use, and if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's the development community's opportunity, and I guess that's their choice. I think that to make everything the best of all worlds in one fell swoop is a little bit like suggesting that you should accept right away without clear title. It's a little bit of a slippery slope, and there's going to be a point where you can't just hand your SDCs off. You have to let these tools play it through. And I think it's also important to remember that your Public Works Director and city staff has done an outstanding job over the years addressing how SDCs are collected and managed and utilized. And I think that's clear in that the city's never really, to my knowledge, gotten any kind of a reprimand or a slap on the hand for how they manage their SDCs. The idea of just writing a check because it seems like the right thing to do is not consistent with how SDCs, the methodology and how SDCs are intended to be used. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Nanki.
Do you have any problem with 2-week hiatus for written testimony and some other explanatory type material from the city, just looking at those issues for down the road? I'm assuming you may do more of these for someone in the future as well.
Certainly, and I think if that's what council deems as the best action, I think that's fine. I would only ask that two things: that city staff or that the applicant get the last chance to rebut any analysis by city staff. The other thing I would ask is that the collection of reimbursements could begin immediately as though it were approved today. And that way, if the council comes up with a different decision, then that can be addressed. I would hate for my client to miss an opportunity to be reimbursed if something came in between now and the time this decision was made.
Is there potential for somebody to do something in 2 weeks?
Well, I don't know, and I don't know how long. I mean, if you plan on making a decision in 2 weeks, then that's probably okay. But I mean, deliberation can always be continued on, and that I just ask that that be considered.
Other questions? Councilor Benjamin.
Just a quick comment. I think everybody's here at the council is motivated to see things move forward in some fashion. So yeah, whatever deliberation will happen or information, 2 weeks, and then probably very shortly thereafter, everybody will know what's on the table.
Okay, other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Close the hearing.
Well, let's see. There was a discussion in the council previously whether you wanted to continue the hearing or if you want to close the hearing now and just allow written evidence later on.
Yeah, I'd prefer written only if we want to go that way. So
you can go ahead and close the hearing now.
We'll close the hearing. Councilor Nanki, you got a motion?
Yeah, and that was to leave the written record open for 7 days
If I may, the applicant did talk about having an opportunity to respond to staff's analysis.
Correct.
So I think, given that, what we would need to do is to allow new evidence through March 21st, allow rebuttal to that through March 28th. That would include the staff's analysis of that new evidence, and then to allow the applicant final written argument through Monday, April 4th. You would then be able to reach a final decision at your April 10th meeting, or excuse me, April 11th meeting. So moved?
Yeah, but with a question added on top of it in regards to the ability to collect fees over, what is that, 3 weeks?
We can't do that.
No?
We don't have any authority to collect.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to kind of go with that, because it would just seem weird. Okay. Yeah, I like that motion. Thank you, Counselor. And so I will so move.
You want to restate your motion?
May I?
Essentially to leave the record open for written testimony through March 21st, staff and rebuttal by March 28th, and then final applicant comments by April 4th.
Correct.
Okay. Need a second? Moved by Counselor Nanki, seconded by Counselor Benjamin to I'm not even how to
That's more
rephrase it.
comments and critiques and final comments by April 4th.
There we go. You've heard the motion. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
And we will make a decision that night. Yeah.
Okay.
But this will just be fascinating.
Now we're getting to information reports, right?
Where the heck are we?
On information reports. And we've got a number of them here. We've got one on a planning administrator decision. These are information reports to the council to divide a lot into 3 parcels on Swagel Road. Another planning administrator decision to change previously approved subdivision, remove a proposed stub street, and replace it with basically a cul-de-sac. We have the Historic Landmarks Commission accomplishments and work plan, which we heard earlier from Mr. Hendry. We have parking. We have a Capital Mall parking technology phase 1 and 2 project update. These are the new parking meters that have been installed around the Capitol in that area. And then we have the fiscal 2015-16 economic development update that we heard at the Urban Renewal agency meeting, and a Pringle Creek development update, which we also heard at the Urban Renewal agency meeting. So those are the information reports the council received tonight in their packet.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question on the parking. So people are really saying that they're willing to take the risk that they won't get cited and park without paying, is what we're actually hearing from violators.
Yes, I've had a couple of our code enforcement officers share that with me, that that's feedback that they've received during enforcement.
Nice. And basically, based on that, we will look at escalation potentials down the road. There's a new one downtown, around the Capitol. There's pay and display. So they're not parking meters where you don't have to go to the quarter to. You go in credit card and put it. Steal the credit cards and try to park with it. But yeah, that way, Councilor Bennett doesn't.
Okay.
Quarters.
We're to ordinances. Councilor Nanki, do you have a motion?
So she needs to do first reading of it, correct?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yes.
Ordinance Bill Number 416, an ordinance allowing drive-through uses in the Broadway High Street Retail Overlay Zone, amending SRC 613.015, 613.020, and 613.030.
And that's actually Councilor Bennett's ward.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. I have a question. I guess it's to Glenn.
You need a motion?
On this proposed hearing.
Get a motion.
Ordinance. Okay? Who am I addressing it to? Not.
You want a motion?
I'm listening to my attorney here.
Motion, then you get a second, then you can ask the question.
Okay. Yeah, just see if it'll go anywhere. Okay. Conduct first reading of, I move that council conduct first reading of ordinance bill number 4-16, amending SRC chapter 613 to allow drive-through banks and credit unions as a conditional use in the Broadway High Street Retail Overlay Zone and establish design standards for drive-through uses in the Broadway High Street Retail Overlay Zone and advance the ordinance bill to second reading for enactment.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to advance this reading, ordinance to a second reading. I've got a question to Glenn. What is I'm struggling as somebody who represented business for 30 years in my career on why we're making an exception in an overlay zone when we're hearing from one neighborhood association they don't want it and the other one doesn't want it. That's okay with them, but not in their area. And, you know, if it's okay for a bank, which is a business, why is it not okay for a restaurant? Why is it not okay for somebody else that needs drive-in to make it a successful business? I'm really struggling with why we're making an exception for a bank in this area. If you want a pedestrian-friendly zone, I'm fine with that, and you want to take it out of there and ban it, I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with saying, okay, yeah, but they asked, so we'll do it for them, but nobody else, and we won't consider anybody else. It's, to me, if you want to do it, open it up and let those folks that depend on these do them, and if you don't do it and leave that a pedestrian-friendly zone. So, I'm looking for logic from you folks because it popped up.
So the question is, what's the logic in limiting the amendment to a one use only, and that's the bank or a credit union?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, the planning administrator, to come up here to the podium, but so she can give you more detail than I can. But it's my understanding that when the Planning Commission and staff looked at this, they determined that the request was reasonable for that particular area, given the fact that the credit union desires to build another office building and bank facility on a vacant parcel next to the existing facility, that it was reasonable, they would meet all of the other design guidelines, that the impact on pedestrian movement and human scale orientation would be minimal, that other uses such as eating establishments with drive-throughs or I don't know what other ones would be, but would potentially have more of an adverse impact. And so that was the conclusion that this amendment should be limited to this use only, as I understand it. And I will ask you to fill in the blanks there.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, Planning Administrator. I think Glenn pretty much covered it. We did have a discussion at Planning Commission about other uses that might want to drive through, and the thought was this kind of was a compromise. It's a pretty small area that this would apply to, and there was a feeling that you wouldn't see a proliferation of banks in this area, where you might if you open it up to restaurants or coffee shops or something like that. The design standards are really trying to keep the drive-through, minimize the impact by keeping it in the back and limiting how many lanes you can have, also making it a conditional use. And the Planning Commission also discussed that if this building actually gets built with this use, and it seems minimal, that in the future they could consider, or the council could consider, allowing more drive-through type uses like a dry cleaner or something, not necessarily restaurants or fast food or coffee shops. It's also consistent with an amendment we did a few years ago for downtown. So we opened up the historic district for drive-through banks downtown only, credit unions and banks, and not other uses, again, to minimize the impact of it. And to clarify, Can-Do was supportive of the amendment. Grant's testimony was that they were supportive, but only in the Can-Do part of the overlay zone. So.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to the grant as well. I want to speak to this too, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to my motion. I'm not aware of neighborhood opposition to this. I think to characterize it, I think what they're describing, it wasn't we favor it in Can-Do so much as we favored in this particular application and really want to understand carefully what happens if this were to be expanded to other uses. MAPS is ready to go with their project. They have done it in such a way that it is not intrusive into into Broadway. I mean, the way at least the way it appeared to have structured it, this is a very much needed service in this neighborhood. And it's a neighborhood that's changing and growing and developing, particularly housing. It serves well the adjoining neighborhood. This actually, I think, was a very popular idea in this area. What would not be popular is to allow a proliferation of this in this overlay zone, I think as the motion reads, without just an awful lot of careful thought by the planning department describing this in a broader way. The overlay zone is in there for a particular reason, and it has been really successful in that Broadway development area. And I really understand what you're talking about, Ms. Mayor, in terms of why not other businesses. And I think that this motion leaves open that discussion. I really would urge the council to vote for this. This is an opportunity for this neighborhood that it would be really unfortunate to miss, to have this building move ahead and this service made available to them. And then we can have a further discussion on down the road on the broader context I think you rightly bring up, Mr. Mayor. If that, I appreciate your support on this.
Yes, Councilor Bauer.
Just to double check that the structure of this is roughly the same as the development of it in downtown when the same issue came up in the downtown area?
Yes,
Okay.
very similar.
And I'd speak to this in terms of the investment that that's already been made in this area. This is just one more jewel that is going to keep building commitment by people to land businesses into this area. So it's got a lot of, it's just a multiplier.
Any other discussion? Okay, we've got the motion to advance the, for this first reading, to advance it to a second reading for enactment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes. We've now got, okay, how the clerk is this? 7B, will the recorder announce the ordinance? Either proposed.
Ordinance Bill Number 516, an ordinance imposing a 3% tax on the sale of marijuana items by a marijuana retailer and referring the question to voters at the November 2016 general election.
Councilor Nanki? Or nobody is called?
Yeah, just a quick question to staff on the staff recommendation. Essentially, it has enact ordinance bill number 5-16, and essentially, wouldn't we just say that conduct a public hearing on ordinance bill 5-16 prior to second reading of the ordinance and then move from there?
That is the staff recommendation.
Okay. Just on it has two parts to the recommended action. First was enact ordinance bill 516, which would refer the tax to the Salem voters in the November 2016 election, and then second part was to actually have a public hearing.
Correct. The ordinances that get referred to the voters are awkwardly worded, so sorry about that.
Okay.
Also, I just wanted to note for the record that we have 6 members of council here tonight, council rules and the charter, I believe, require 5 affirmative votes for an ordinance.
Correct.
Just so you know.
So yes, I would move that we hold a public hearing on ordinance Bill 516.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Nanki, seconded by Counselor Lewis to basically to pass the staff recommendation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. For all those in favor of the ordinance or the recommended action, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Can we do this in 5 minutes, folks?
Yeah, we can get done. We can get done.
Okay,
I don't know.
comments? So,
take a
no second reading, we get to public comment. We got Richard Reed.
Oops, we're going to need it.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome.
Thank
Thanks for
you,
your patience.
Mayor Pro Tem. Sorry about the mistake earlier, but I'm here tonight, and I'm here. So thank you very much. This is like yet another time I've come to council, and it's like a seminar in land use planning and fiscal whatever and everything. My goodness. I just have a couple of items I want to talk to you about tonight that weren't on the agenda. I'm Richard Reed. I'm speaking as co-chair for Oregonians for a Voice in Annexations. We usually just refer to as OCVA. I live at 3242 Bluff Avenue Southeast. And I come to you today to suggest a simple but important edit to our city code. I believe there's a Scrivener error that may only require council instruction to staff. So some background is necessary, though. The last session, a contentious legislature passed Senate Bill 1573. It shuns city and county home rule and removes the right to vote on annexations from city charters in nearly 36 Oregon communities. Voting on annexations is a legally established right in Oregon. Obtaining the right to vote required considerable citizen commitment to initiative campaigns. Because city charters are similar to constitutions that create broad powers, citizen leaders deliberately put the vote on the right to vote on annexations in their city charters, as we did here in Salem 16 years ago. Senate Bill 1573 was one of 4 bills used as a bargaining chip in a bargain that resulted in legislative interference with city charters. But this legislative interference affects more charters than just those where voting on annexations is now established. If the governor approves Senate Bill 1573, the threat of legislative interference will have a chilling effect on all citizens and council efforts to amend their city charters. No wonder both the League of Oregon Cities and the League of Oregon Women Voters joined others pleading that the governor veto Senate Bill 1573. And here I want to publicly thank League of Oregon Cities President Brad Nanki for making sure their veto letter was timely written and sent to the governor. So thank you, Brad. For that matter, it would be appropriate for council to join others and ask the governor to veto this threat to our charter. This later threat to the sanctity of local control makes it especially important that Salem citizens know we have initiative rights. And here's a proposal to accomplish that. Basically, the code now says, it's section 11-240, it says, whenever the council shall deem it expedient to submit to the legal voters of the city a municipal measure or amendment to the charter, then it describes the process. Unfortunately, section 11-240 is silent on the citizens' right to submit questions to local voters. So to correct the oversight, there's a short phrase that could be inserted that would say, whenever the council or the electors of the city shall deem it expedient to submit to the legal voters, the city, a municipal measure or amendment to the charter, and so on. Just include the reference to the electors. My hope is that by doing that, then more people in the town will know that they have that right. So I'll just stop there if there's any questions.
Questions? Councilor Dickey.
Actually, I have a motion. I'm going to move for a 10-minute extension.
Second.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Vote aye. Aye. Okay. Councilor Benjamin.
So I'm kind of asking both the lawyer and you, what needs to happen to get that reversed? It's just a matter of getting the governor of Oregon to
veto the legislation.
Yeah.
Yes, basically, this is why I'm suggesting it might be an action for council. There are 234 members in the League of Oregon Cities, so you wouldn't be alone in this, but just to go ahead and send a letter to the governor just asking her simply to veto the bill, because the bill, as I said, specifically refers and it interferes with city charters.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Nanki.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. There's 34 to 35 of the 242 cities in Oregon have a charter requirement for voter annexation. And, you know, when I ran 15 plus years ago, I was opposed to voter annexation, and I still kind of basically am. But it's in our charter, and who is the state government to tell us we have to throw out pieces of our charter that we duly put in place? So, hence the reason I signed said letter as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, for the record, the suggestion I'm making about the fix, the Scrivener error on the city code, I'm going to give to your staff so they can have a copy of that.
That's great, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, Ron Sturba.
You want to extend that more?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Temp and Councilor, city staff, for citizens. This is hard for me to come up here. We had another person killed in our neighborhood on 25th Street in front of the post office. If you haven't gone past the sidewalk separator, I should say the island in the roadway right at the exit to the post office on 25th, you'll see the memorial set up for the person who lost their life here last month. In the past, within the last 2 years, a person was killed at 19th and Center Street. Another person was killed just recently in the fall on Mission Street. And I spoke here recently about the person who was hit just beyond the center island on 17th Street. This is tough. I mean, I'm looking at death no matter where I go, 3 different directions from my home. What I'd like to see on these islands, don't plant trees, don't put an obstacle that's between the pedestrian and the driver. I'd like to see the curbs on these islands with reflectors on them, not just orange posts. Get those reflectors around there. I would like to see this island removed on 25th Street and put in the middle of the block, mainly because you have a driveway for patrons out of the post office, the trucks going into the post office, and Claude Street, and the crosswalk. This is wrong. We're putting people at risk there. When you design a crosswalk, put it in the middle of the block away from traffic. Because drivers now, when they come upon that divider, have to think about turning left. They have to think about traffic coming out of the post office. They have to think about traffic coming the other way. Now, it's not a good thing. And at this point, I don't want to see that. What I want to see, too, is the responsibility of our city staff to come up with a good safety area around these islands for crosswalks. Last week, I left everyone a copy of the Warbler in your mail. I am not the only one, but it appears I'm the only one in Salem speaking about streetlights. I'm glad to see that up in Portland, they're addressing the island, or the article. And also, this was in the newspaper. Talks about the surprise. The deadliest driving is winter rain. And boy, do we have it here. So when it comes to street lighting, we need to take an approach to giving everyone a chance to say, I want that. I want better safety in my city. And that's street lights.
Okay.
Good street lights.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to counselors' items. First is 9-2A, Counselor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council waive the $5,157 balance of fees owed to the city of by the Willamette Queen related to the March 2015 use of the Wallace Marine Boat Dock and parking lot for outhauling and repairs. I further move that staff draft a policy and fee schedule for council review that addresses future use of city facilities for this type of activity.
Second.
It's been moved by Counselor Bennett, seconded by Counselor Benjamin, to waive the $5,300 fee.
Well, $5,100.
$5,100 fee, and
He'd
also
probably
for
take
this,
the 200 addition, too.
and to instruct staff to develop a policy for future
Yes. Yeah, Mr.
future occurrences.
Mr. Mayor, you've got you've heard from the captain. You've got a pretty complete, I think, analysis of what happened here. I think it's just a situation where the current fee structure is limited to the point that it really does create an exorbitant fee for someone in this situation, and there's no reason to believe we might not see the Buena Vista Ferry, the Wheatland Ferry, others that need to be cleaned brought to our dock. We happen to have a spot where they can bring it up. There is a spot where it can be worked on. This did not interfere with the public. It didn't close the park, which is usually what's contemplated by this use fee. And I think it gives the staff a chance to really kind of re-examine this. I just think it was, I think ultimately it's just too much for what happened here. This was just didn't interfere with anyone else's park uses. This wasn't a closure for an event. It wasn't any of the kind of things we usually think of for that sort of special event fee. So I'd ask you to do this and allow staff to address this. I've talked with the city staff about it. They, I think, understand that certainly this was agreed to. I think it wasn't fully understood what this was going to look like in terms of $5,000 for a business this size. And I think that the staff has indicated a real willingness to fix this, or at least see if there is a way to develop a fairer fee schedule. So.
Questions? Councilor Nank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The docks and what have you were closed for some periods of time at the beginning and the end, and so I just wanted to make sure we got those kind of pieces of the policy, but this is max more than if you were dropping quarters all day long into a meter.
Yeah.
So just to look at the reasonableness of a...
They did pay, I think, on both ends as required.
But as far as during the storage time, if somebody's having to work on something for an extended duration based on someone else's interpretation of what they may have to do to their vessel, or vessel as...
Well, if I may, we did
say.
not have, we had never had a request like this before.
Yeah.
So we scoured the books and found the special use fee and laid it out. I don't think Captain Chesbro ever imagined that he'd be
out of the water,
for as long as he was. So I think we were clear on the fee. I think what was unclear is just the amount of time that it was going to take. So if council approves this, then we'll develop something that makes more sense. You know, what I've explained to Councilor Bennett and to Captain Chesbro is, you know, we are the trustees of parks, and parks are really not intended for this kind of use. So we were trying to find a way to make it work, and we always want to find a way to make things work. So we'll develop something for the council to consider here in the next few months, you know, with a fee schedule that perhaps makes a little more sense.
Councilor Lewis, then Councilor Dickey.
Yeah, move an extension for 5 minutes.
Second.
Moved and second to extend for 5 more minutes. All those in favor?
Aye. And it's 10:08 real time.
You know, this is one of those issues where, tell me which side you want me to argue, and I'll argue it for you. And as I spoke to the captain and his wife a couple of weeks ago, I think the issue here is clearly nobody, not the captain or the city staff, had any intention of the boat being out of the water more than 4 days. Thus, the fee was set based on that assumption. If the parties had known the true length of time, I think the agreement would have been different. I think the staff would have, as they do, found a way to make the charge appropriate, as they will do now looking forward. One of the issues is, and this is something I've learned over the last year or so, the city runs a very difficult business, and we do have to represent the best interest of the citizens. The fee schedule is the fee schedule. Once you start making deals, then you're a deal maker, and you have guaranteed yourselves problems. So it's not something that you want the city to be doing haphazardly. On the other hand, is this situation unique enough where it really does cry out for adjustment? And I've come to the conclusion, and again, either way, just tell me which side you want me to argue. But right now, I'm on the side that the charge is excessive. And so, especially since they have recently paid an additional $1,000, I take that to be an extreme amount of good faith on their part. And they're asking for relief, if any. And I think that it is a justified request. And so I'm going to vote for the motion.
Councilor Benjamin.
Well, this business is really unique in this area. I mean, when I look at all the other businesses, all businesses to me are important, but this particular one is something that would draw people into the city. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. We will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're to 9.2B. Councilor Dickey.
Okay, so I'm just watching the time here. I
We have over 3 minutes.
Okay, so I move to direct staff to prepare and apply for the Federal Emergency Management Agency staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, i.e. SAFER grant, for the purpose of placing one peak period engine in service at Station 8 to provide 40-hour per week fire and emergency medical response.
Second.
Briefly address this. I'd like to have more discussion about this during our budget cycle. This grant, though, the application is due at the end of this month, so we're on a pretty tight time schedule, although I'm told by staff that they could have the grant prepared and ready to go by then. You all have the maps. You all got the maps in your packet, and you can see the effects of when we had to close Station 8. And I think this is one way to help bring some level of service back into the area, and it will help relieve some of the extra call volumes at some of the other stations. One of the things I did, kind of a back of the napkin calculation, looking at the map kind of from Hyacinth north, and the counts for calls over 8 minutes went way up. By my calculations, from 79% response time in less than 8 minutes down to 21% response time. So, and when we closed the fire station, 2 people lost their lives just very shortly after that. So anyway, I think this is a good step towards bringing some fire service back to the area.
Comments?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, great.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.